members of the public we have attending this meeting tonight. The committee of the whole is designed for the public to view the separate committees working. All of the committees are encouraged to take questions at the end of their section regarding the items presented. I've also asked for committees to try to address some of the questions from the June 15th meeting if they're able. I just ask that we take time into consideration when doing so, since we have a lot of committees meeting tonight and we want to make sure we can get through everything. We are going to try something a little different tonight. We are going to turn videos off for people that aren't in specific committees so that the public can see who is in each specific committee. So when we go in each committee, I'll read off who's in that committee, and then we'll turn everyone else's videos off. So the first committee that's up is the Personnel Committee, and it is Lydia Stutzman as the chair, myself as vice chair, Melissa Booth, and then Kathy DiMarino.
Thank you, Leslie. So today for the Personnel Committee work, we'll first start with introducing Kelly Hodge, who's joining us, and I'll let her introduce herself because I wouldn't do her justice. But we've asked her to help us look into the complaints that we've received, the alleged criminal behavior that we've had as part of our recent history, and then also reviewing some of our all related policies and procedures regarding discrimination, harassment, and things of that nature, as well as the processes around it. So we really wanted to, as mentioned in previous meetings, have a third party come in and review this on behalf of the board. Before I turn it over to Kelly, where she'll review what that will look like and what she will be undertaking, I also wanted to let you know that when Kelly is speaking, I'll hand it over to John, who wishes to share a few thoughts in general about where we are and how we're thinking about things. And then I will answer a few questions that came up on the 15th. I want to address some of those questions, and then we'll take questions as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to come this evening. It's really a pleasure to be able to be with you and to kind of introduce myself to everyone and hopefully provide to the school community, which is most important in this particular process, the ability to see me and to hear me and to have an idea from me directly as to why I'm here and what I am been tasked to do and what I hope to do over the course of this summer. While there's no finite timeline for when this process that I'm engaging in, which is to really look into policies, procedures, and various complaints and concerns that have been brought to the district, which have been shared with me, there's no quote unquote end date. I do have a prospective time frame that I would like to return information back to the district, and hopefully I can do that by the end of the summer in order for the district to implement things moving forward. Most importantly, to make sure that if anything is being identified as a gap or a problem or a misstep, that gap can be filled, that problem can be addressed, and that misstep can be acknowledged and not repeated for the future. So that's what I hope to do. My past experiences have been varied in terms of my practice of law, but a great deal of it over more recent years, probably the past 5 to 7, have been heavily in the realm of education, elementary and secondary ed, with the School District of Philadelphia overseeing violence and crimes and incidents, particularly bullying and harassment reported in schools, and working at the state level for issues concerning kids and school safety, particularly after Sandy Hook and the sad tragedy that took place in Connecticut, and just other things that obviously are of paramount importance to parents, making sure their children are safe in our school buildings. So that is a bit of the lens that I bring to what I do, in addition to having familiarity with criminal justice. So a lot of the subject matters and things that I know have been quite concerning to all of you are equally concerning to me as a person who has worked in this area for a great deal of time. And so I'm here to hear from you. I'm here to gather facts and information. I'm here to compile those things and to bring it back and provide it to the district in a candid way with some real tangible solutions. I'll ask now that the PowerPoint that I've shared with the district be displayed so I can just go over a few of the things that I just mentioned just now to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. I also know that by seeing a visible or something visual, that it does help kind of reinforce what it is that I'm looking to do. And so the process that I've been asked to engage in has a part 1 level and a part 2 level as I've heard it and have discussed it with the members of the board. I'm looking to review all of the information that's been received involving the inappropriate and alleged criminal behavior of the former faculty member, Stephen Rock. And in that regard, I'm also reviewing any other reported inappropriate behavior that the school received notice of, and that's pending a final outcome. My independent entry into this as someone external is I don't know anyone within the district. I don't know any of the specific parties. And again, my desire is to basically take the facts as I find them and then to go ahead and make recommendations that I feel, one, promote safety, and 2, are compliant with the laws of this jurisdiction, and 3, provide reassurance to the board and to the school community that that the school is responsive, not only to concerns that are brought to them, but also in preventing and promoting prevention strategies moving forward. That's been the tenet in large part to the work I've done throughout much of my career. Part 2, and what I'm looking to do, is reviewing, as I stated, the district policies and procedures regarding harassment, sexual harassment, the code of conduct, the disciplinary process, and all other related sections. So even if something doesn't fall neatly at this point under one of those headings, I'm looking to other areas where there can be a potential impact or an impediment as to these areas working well and being performed well. So if there's something that somehow doesn't allow for an ease in reporting or an ease in responsiveness, we're looking to make sure that there aren't any barriers to people feeling comfortable. And that's where I'm looking for that input from the community that they may have already shared in the past, but they're welcome to share it again, to indicate what would, even if it's not a sexual assault, sexual harassment type matter, but a bullying matter, which I know a lot of things that engage in the school setting involve children dealing with and trying to address bullying or being harassed on their own, and really needing the adults in the space to be responsive. I also will review all employee administrative reporting, response, training, and procedures to make sure that the employees know as mandatory reporters what they're required to do under child abuse, but beyond that, what they also must do in order to go ahead and really make sure that children do feel safe in coming to them, and that it's not up to the children to decide, oh, is this an okay person to report to, or is this an okay person to report to? Any adult in the space is an okay person to report to. And then to know that in doing so, that matters will be addressed. Next slide, please. What I wanted to share is how I'm going to be approaching the outreach and information gathering. My outreach will be made by email to the parent of any current student or any student that's under 18 years of age. If a complaint or a comment has been provided by a student who has graduated or who's over 18, outreach will be made to that person directly. I'll request to speak to the individuals at whatever comfort level they like in terms of timing and whether they want to do it by phone or video conferencing. And I'm going to schedule it for the earliest available time that works best for myself and for that individual. I do take handwritten notes as I'm having the conversations, and if they want, if the party prefers, I know sometimes it's better to sit back and reflect. There may be a need to create a chronology, or there may be a need for somebody to just think about what they want to talk about and then put it in their own words. And I welcome that as well, because that way I know that whatever I'm capturing or what they feel is most important for me to hear, I'm hearing and I'm receiving. And then it may prompt additional questions by me, which I can go ahead and schedule a convenient time for that as well. I do want to underscore that all conversations are voluntary, and they will be kept confidential to the extent possible. I say to the extent possible because while people may report some things and want to maintain a level of anonymity, the ability to respond to something and to do so effectively may be limited by that. And so people are only asked to share what they feel comfortable in sharing. But there will be a need if there's a need to follow up or report to an outside entity. I have a duty to report that. The district has a duty to report that. If law enforcement or someone else needs to be notified, or a statewide reporting agency like Childline, then they will be notified as required. And I just want to encourage anyone who does want to come forward to feel free to do so with any information that they feel might be relevant for me to have. I don't want anyone to be hesitant or to somehow feel that maybe it's not worth saying. I often say to people, it's not their required need to know, oh, does this fall under this, or is this bullying, or is this sex harassment, or is this, you know, this type of harassment. You're not there to kind of go ahead and put a label on it. You're just there to tell your narrative. Then I will be able to take that narrative and then find out where it falls within what the school district, one, needs to know, and two, must or should act upon. And that's what I'm hoping to do. Next slide, please. At the conclusion of everything that I receive, I'm going to go ahead and compile everything into a report that I will provide to the board along with an executive summary. The report's going to include a summary of all the information gathered and the conclusions that I've reached. And as I stated prior to displaying the visual aids of the slides, I'm hoping to deliver this report in August. However, as I'm sure all of you can appreciate, we don't know what we don't know, or I don't know what I don't know at this point. I know what I'm looking to ask about and to hear about from people, but there may be other things that are going to come to light, and that may warrant an extension of time in terms of following up, or there could be just an inability to access people based on schedules. Those things are going to be updated to the district, but I'm going to really work concertedly to try to make sure that they have information available to them that is, one, thorough, and two, timely, but I don't want to compromise one for number two. And so if for some reason I don't believe that I have everything that I need to give a comprehensive report in the time frame I've outlined or projected, I'll let the district know that. And of course, in turn, I'm sure they will let the public and you all know that as well, so that I can give a projected timeline as to when I can get that to them. But simultaneous with what I'm gathering, again, I'm looking at the policies and procedures, and I'm trying to take what I'm hearing and looking at how or what in the policies don't address that, or maybe address it, but just not as clearly as it should, and looking to bolster and revise that in order to make sure it's clear. So I believe that there's just one slide after this, which contains my information. I encourage you all to feel free to email or call me. That's my office line, and I will try and have been trying to give a call back to anyone who may reach out to me. My general practice is within a day. If there's any reason that I know I'm going to be greatly delayed in calling someone back, I may have my assistant reach out in my stead and just give an update as to, are you available to talk on this date, or I've received your message. But I will do all I can to go ahead and provide a response as timely as possible. And so with that, I will stop here and turn it over to either Lydia or John. I'm not sure who's going to take it next, but I'm happy to stay on and respond to any questions.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
I'll hand it over to John, and then I would like to address just a couple other questions that we've had, and then I will open it up to questions. And Paul, if you would like to mute me so I don't provide feedback, please feel free. And then after John, I can come back on.
Thanks, Lydia, and thanks, everyone. Although I am not a member of the Personnel Committee, I did, for my own sake as a board member, want to do some research on the relationship between the district solicitor and the school board, because from many of the emails that we received, opinions are all over the place about what makes that relationship in terms of responsibilities, so on and so forth. As I mentioned, there have been tons of questions about the relationship between the district and Fox Rothschild LLP as the solicitor for the Owen J. Roberts School District. So let me be clear, the local school board is a body corporate and can act only as a whole, unless a duty or responsibility has been delegated or assigned to either individual board members or a committee of the board. In other words, no individual board member has the authority independent of the majority decision of the full board. Among other responsibilities, the board has the responsibility to set local policy and regulation and to appoint and supervise the superintendent. One of the other responsibilities of the board is to hire legal counsel to represent the interests of the district as represented by the board. It is the responsibility of the superintendent to run the day-to-day operations of the school district, including recommending and carrying out the executive functions of the district, as well as implementing policy, managing within the budget, supervising personnel, etc. To summarize, the board sets the policy which the superintendent is responsible to implement and manage. The district solicitor works for the benefit of the school district and therefore reports ultimately to the board. The board unanimously appointed Fox Rothschild LLP as the solicitor for the district at the public board meeting that we held on May 18th, 2020 under agenda item 10.2. The solicitor is often engaged to provide advice to both the board and the superintendent as they have a common interest in the welfare of the district. But the client is always the school district as represented by the board. Now, members of this board from time to time may receive information that is deemed confidential, such as that relating to personnel issues and legal matters. Board members who share confidential information regarding personnel matters may be in violation of applicable laws such as HIPAA, and it undermines required due diligence or required due process under the school code. Board members who share information about individual students may be in violation of state and federal law. For example, FERPA or the State Board of Education regulations, etc. It's standard practice that boards do not involve themselves in most operational matters of the district, as it may impede our ability to perform our duties in an oversight capacity. The solicitor generally does work closely with the superintendent in recommending policy updates and carrying out policy on a day-to-day basis at the direction of the board. If a conflict arises between the board and the superintendent, the solicitor must advise the board. The solicitor has an obligation to report to the board when an employee, including the superintendent, is about to engage in conduct that is injurious to the organization. High-performing districts benefit from a strong relationship between the board, the superintendent, and the solicitor. Recently, there have been concerns relating to conflicts of interest, relating to the board's direction to have Kelly B. Hodge Esquire lead an independent assessment of school policies and procedures and the implementation of those policies and procedures, to identify potential areas of improvement for the district, specifically relating to claims involving inappropriate sexual conduct relating to both teacher-to-student relationships as well as student-to-student or peer-to-peer relationships. Because Ms. Hodge works for a law firm that already represents the district, us, the board, there is no conflict of interest that exists between the board, Fox Rothschild LLP, or Ms. Hodge as it relates to this engagement. In the spirit of transparency, and as I mentioned, not as a member of the Personnel Committee, I just want to share with you my own insight as to why I fully supported the engagement of Ms. Hodge on this matter. One has to do with competency. I am incredibly encouraged by Ms. Hodge's background, both from a experience in the court system as a prosecutor, district attorney, and also, and maybe just as importantly to me, her intimate knowledge of issues dealing with Title IX knowing that later in this year we have a number of issues around the restructuring of Title IX responsibilities. So first and foremost, from my own personal standpoint, competency to me overrides optics any day of the week. Secondly is expediency. We heard through the many emails that were sent, people demanding answers and demanding answers very quickly. Had we had to engage in a process of searching and contracting and vetting and setting up terms with someone that maybe had similar, maybe even lesser qualifications than Ms. Hodge, my fear was we wouldn't be able to start this investigation until sometime later in the summer, which would have totally eradicated the possibility of having results, hopefully, by the beginning of the school year. It wouldn't have even been a possibility. For those two reasons, as an independent board member myself, again, subject to the vote of the majority, I fully support Ms. Hodge and her efforts. And I hope that we can come with some answers that will help us assess shortfalls so that we can better serve the students of our schools and the residents of our community. That's all I have, Leslie. Thanks.
Thank you, John. There you go, Lydia.
Yeah, I'd unmute myself or get unmuted. John, thank you very much for that. I know you're not an official member of the Personnel Committee, but that was very well said and couldn't agree more. Thank you. I did want to address a couple questions that we received. We received a lot of questions via email from individuals asking for specific information regarding either people or incidents that have occurred. And much like John just shared, that is, we have to maintain employee privacy and student privacy. It's the district's responsibility to do so. So I hope that everyone can relate to the fact that we are unable to share specifics about individuals or specific incidences. There were two questions that took place during the last meeting on the 15th. One was around, it was more of a comment saying that professional staff can view their file and that we have a policy on this, but it hasn't been reviewed since 2007. And then a question about hearing Mrs. Hay mention that everything does not necessarily go into a personnel file. So I wanted to address that and clear that up and share that we do have 3 policies, as a matter of fact, on this that govern the different staff members. It's policy 324, 424, and 524. And if you would ever want to reference them, they very clearly state who can access their file and how. It also clearly states what gets put into a personnel file. There are things that should absolutely not go into a personnel file. It's both very common industry practice as well as there are employment laws related to certain things that should not go into a file, such as I-9 forms. There are also, it's good practice not necessarily include managerial type notes that I might have on people that I'm working with and my team members, but that doesn't go into someone's permanent record in their file unless it becomes something that should become a part of their permanent record and file. Attendance records don't go into files. It's things of that nature. So there are things that will not go into a personnel file, and I wanted to clear that up. And if you do refer to policies 324, 424, and 524, you can see all that is included in there and what does and does not go into a file. We also had a question about the mandated reporting training that occurs and how does it occur and when does it occur. So I did want to also quickly share that whenever a person joins the school district new and they're a new employee, they go through 3 hours of mandated reporter training through Safe Schools, which is an online platform. And every 5 years, the entire staff goes through refresher training that I believe is also 3 hours, but Danielle, Ms. Hay, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the training includes recognition of the signs of abuse and sexual misconduct and reporting requirements around mandated reporting. It also goes over the legal requirements around mandated reporting. And then it also reviews schools' policies related to reporting. So that is done every 5 years as recurring training. Ms. Hay, would you like to add anything to that before I open up for questions?
Yes, that's correct. It's 3 hours of mandated reporter training every 5 years. We are also scheduling in-person training for all of our staff in the coming fall. So we will, that will be addressed later on by the Pupil Services Committee. They'll talk about that in more detail. That won't replace our 3 hours of online training, but it will be in addition to. So yes, you're correct, Lydia.
Great, thank you. Okay, so hopefully that answered some of the questions from last time, but I did want to open it up and see if anybody had additional questions, either on anything in general related to personnel matters for Kelly and or regarding John's statement. So Paul, if you would like to open it up for any questions, I would appreciate it. And I believe you have to raise your hand in the, how do you do this? In the comments, reaction?
Right,
No.
use the raised hand feature. And the first person that has their hand raised is Dan Bridge.
Dan, you are unmuted.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. I'm not sure who that was, John, who was speaking, but you are right, John. This is very bad optics for you. I don't know about the legal, all the legal details that you went through, but this does not look good for you guys. I don't know how many people are, I'll try to keep this short. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but in the United States, the education department estimated that 1 in 10 students are sexually abused by a teacher during their year in school. That was in 2004. The public schools in general have done a terrible job addressing sexual abuse. Now you brought in Kelly Hodge, and in the email from Susan Lloyd, she says, Mrs. Hodge served under former Governor Tom Corbett as Safe Schools advocate under Pennsylvania Commission on Crime Delinquency. Governor Corbett, during that same time you were there, was involved in the biggest child sexual abuse scandal in Pennsylvania history, Jerry Sandusky's Second Mile, where he received over $25,000 in contributions from that charity. He also gave $3 million state grants to Sandusky's charity. And that was going on while you were there, Ms. Hodge. So my overall point is the public school system has failed in general to protect kids. And it looks to me like this is something to cover up for either incompetence or whatever it may be. That's what it appears to me, optics-wise. Okay, so whatever you're doing legally, I'm sure it's perfectly legal. But I'm just telling you, this is the sentiment from people in your community. I have 4 kids in this school. I'm not happy with this, the way this is. This looks like you are coming up to, you're going to come in and say, well, we have all the policies. Did Stephen Rout take that 5-hour course that you mentioned? If he had taken another course, would it have changed things? You know, you're going to come in and say all of our policies were good. All of the things we had in place, we told people to report it and they didn't do it. Everything we did was good, and wash your hands of it. That's what it looks like to most people.
Mr. Bridge, would you mind sharing what township you live in? We have to have that for our public comment.
Yes, that's West Vincent.
Thank you.
West Vincent Township. Thank you.
I don't know if there's a question that I'm able to answer. I can't answer. I will pull to Kelly, although I will say I appreciate your passion around this. I too have kids in this district, and it's honestly, I would say, along with Mr. Deal, the reason I wholeheartedly think that Kelly is the right person for this job to do the things that you're asking of us, and that is to look into what could we have done differently, what could the district do differently. We may have the policies, but are they being followed appropriately so that we can move forward and answer some questions? I don't know, Ms. Hodge, if you would like to add on anything to that.
Sure, I'm happy to, and to Mr. Bridge, I appreciate and fully acknowledge everything that he says. He's a concerned parent. And I'm sure he speaks not just for himself, but he's probably articulating maybe what some other parents are thinking and considering as well. With that in mind, I am not here and being brought into the district with any further directive or agenda except to look and see what our systems are and to identify if we have issues or problems or concerns. And if those issues or concerns are we train people and then in training people, they don't implement what we train them on, that's a problem. If we have policies that have things that are not addressed with clarity so that not only the people tasked with implementing them, but you as parents and your children don't know who to go to or don't feel comfortable going to someone or aren't receiving supportive services. But most of my career has been heavily steeped in, as I said earlier, juvenile justice and in advocating on behalf of kids, in prosecuting people who have hurt children, children who couldn't speak for themselves, autistic children who I know were hurt by adults in a space. And that is what has, in large part, been a steadfast commitment of mine throughout the entirety of my career. I've also defended children when I was a public defender who were very young, but of an arrestable age, that have done things to hurt other children. And understanding the complexities that surround the development of kids, what they are able to speak on, understand, comprehend, and how they manifest their different behavior. So my presence here is to not rubber stamp anything that has been presented or anything that I will find. Mine is to gather, my purpose is to gather what I find and to take it and to deliver it back to the district and to you all as the constituents and say, this is what I see, this is where the problems are. These are things that look good on paper per se, but they aren't being implemented properly. So they're not really, in essence, worth the paper they're written on if they're not being implemented correctly, and really elevating that accountability factor.
Thank you very much, Ken.
You're welcome.
Okay. The next person for public comment is Ms. Heather McCreary. Ms. McCreary, you are unmuted.
Yep. Okay, put that on here. Okay, I just, this question, I guess, Kelly, is for you, and I don't know how you can answer. I don't know the extent of your freedom to answer things, but I served on this board for 4 years right prior to this term. I had 2 daughters go through this school, and when that news came out, I don't know if you can fully appreciate it coming in here, but Mr. Rott touched a lot of lives, and in terms of his influence in the school. My oldest daughter had him for class. My youngest daughter did not, but had many friends that did have him. So when people talk about the optics, I appreciate Mr. Deal's comment and the work that went into that, to presenting it to the district in terms of the questions on the conflict. But I guess the questions are very real ones for you, because I see you as being hired to investigate this. And there's questions that come up to the public, which is, 1, is the public going to have access to the document that you produced? 2, if you come upon a situation that is so, I don't want to say egregious, but so out of line, are you going to refer it to the police or the authorities? And are you actually willing to make a recommendation that administrators be asked to resign if you understand from your review of everything that they should not be in charge of our young people in this district? So I'm sure that's a question that a lot of people have on their minds. And the concern is that if you're working for the same law firm, that law firm may have given advice that was different before, or sat in on a policy meeting or whatnot. And the hard questions that I ask, are you going to be able to make those recommendations? And also too, with regards to the training, that has been offered and what Mrs. Hay has said is the training process, getting the training every 5 years. Well, Mr. Rott actually was in the school during the time that other training took place and would have been in charge of participating in recommending when the teachers get training. So I just want you, when you begin this investigation, to fully appreciate the depths that are needed when you take a look at this on behalf of the young people here in this school district.
Thank you, Ms. McCreary. Lydia, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and respond directly. Everything you said is what I'm cognizant of in terms of my knowledge of what goes on within the district, the timeframes in terms of when training is mandated versus what additional training needs to be layered between mandated training. Mandated training is a baseline of what the state requires, but other additional trainings, and what Mr. Rott and every other faculty member and administrator in the district is required to receive in order to be in a space where there are children. And that is something that I will see by looking at the information I hope to gather, dates, times, so forth and so on. But again, training can be given. I'm also looking at what response was or was not done to the person who received the training, that if there were opportunities to have addressed this earlier, to have dealt with the situation sooner, why was that not done? And that kind of goes into a bit of my recommendations that you just asked about. While I can't be predictive of what my recommendations will be, my recommendations will be candid. While I don't make the call as to who gets to stay or gets to go in terms of hiring or firing, I will let the school district know who I believe has presented themselves as a safety concern. And the district and the board can make a decision based on that recommendation, if that is one or a multitude of recommendations that I need to make. And as far as, I think you said, is the public going to have access to the document? I'm producing a comprehensive document to the district. It will have an executive summary, and the board, I expect, will make a decision on whether to release all, a portion, some, or what of that particular document. But I am generating my work at the request of the board, who wants to know this information and wants to have an independent comprehensive review of their policies and procedures and people who are tasked with implementing them. And that's what I intend to give them. And in turn, in giving that to them, they work on behalf of the citizens. And so it would be up to the board and you all as constituents to hopefully determine that shared information. I'm hoping I answered all of your questions. I think I did. I tried to jot them down as I was going, but if I missed one, I apologize.
Thank you again, Kelly.
So we have one more. It's Mr. O'Sullivan.
Okay, after Mr. O'Sullivan, I think we will have to, I think he's the only other hand we have raised, and then we'll move on to the next committee. Mr. O'Sullivan, would you mind also sharing your township?
Yeah, Paul O'Sullivan, West Vincent Township.
Thank you.
So is the report going to be made available to the public? That's what I wasn't sure about.
Mr. O'Sullivan, I'm delivering the report to the district, and then the district will determine the publication. I cannot and would not release the confidences of that publicly. So the district will have it, and the board will make that determination.
And Ms. Haj, are those reports typically, how detailed are they typically?
Very, yes, very detailed. I mean, there could be, I would expect that there will be privileged information that's contained in those reports. It could be, HIPAA, FERPA related, those types of things. The ability to go ahead and redact information or to provide to the public what the district wants them to have in order to have that knowledge and be assured that this is what they've received. Again, not knowing what the recommendations would be, let's say that I say, person Mrs. Smith, who is a teacher in the 10th grade, made decisions in this case that I have determined compromise the safety of a student or students on repeated occasions, then that would be something that obviously, you know, is a recommendation. Whether or not that's something that is protected, I cannot say it would necessarily be protected, but if it is a recommendation, then the district would be able to act on that, as opposed to something that's HIPAA or FERPA protected, where it is a student record of a child or is a medical record, like someone has revealed to me that they have some type of medical condition which prevented them from doing something or inhibited them from doing something. That would be something that's HIPAA protected. So.
Okay, thank you. We'll have to, it's a really good question, Mr. Sullivan, and I think as we go through this, we'll see if there's a way, because we do want to be able to share what we learn, but we obviously also have to be careful about how much we share about, again, individuals and specifics. So we'll have to figure out how to do that in the most transparent way possible. Thank you.
Lydia, Lydia,
Yes.
I have a question for Kelly, and I may have missed this, but is there a regularity that we can expect to get an update, like every 2 weeks or every week? Kelly, do you have a timeline that will at least be updated and kept?
I expect to update the board once I'm at a point that I'm going to outreach to people within the next week or so.
Okay.
And then I hope to schedule meetings over the course of the next couple of weeks. Obviously depends on volume of responses I receive back.
Mm-hmm.
And usually after the conclusion of me at least having these initial contacts and conversations, then I would update you all as to saying, this is where I am, and I can project out and have a better idea. Since I don't know what information I'm going to receive yet, it's hard to give that hard and fast prediction. And I will say that generally I try not to make a promise I can't keep, is the way I refer to it. I try not to commit to dates or timelines that I'm not going to produce, because if I was sitting in the position of anyone in the public, I'd hear that date or I'd hear those days and I'd hold on to it like a dog on a bone, and I'd say, well, hey, it's not delivered. And that's not what I, one, should do, practically speaking. It's not fair to you all, and it's also not really ensuring the integrity of the process, because I just don't know where I'm going to have to go to next. But I will provide updates throughout, especially if I know that things are not going on the time frame that I hope to deliver, which is August.
Thank you. That's exactly why I wanted you to make that statement. We don't want the expectation out there that we're going to have a report every week and information. So thank you very much. You said that very well. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Kelly, John Deal, just one question from my standpoint. If you could explain for our sake and the public's sake how your efforts might integrate with, or there's an active investigation going on, is my understanding from the Chester County DA. How does your efforts overlap with theirs, or is it separate and independent? How does that work?
The investigation and what the district attorney's office is doing regarding Mr. Rock is separate and apart from mine. I'm not looking to overlap, interject myself, impede, having been in the prosecutor's office and having been the DA in Philadelphia. While I would be cognizant of when a school, for example, had a matter that they were going ahead and pursuing in their administrative capacity, in no way would I want to compromise what is going on in the district attorney's office with what is going on here. And at this point in time, I don't believe, based upon what I know and what I'm tasked with doing, I don't believe there's any need for there to be an overlap. I don't foresee that at this point. So if I do find the need to have contact with the DA's office, I expect that I'll be able to call the office and speak with the person or persons there that I need to speak with and get the information that I need, or at least see if I can get the information that I need if it's germane to what I'm doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome, John.
Lydia, I just wanted to interject one thing. And to hit on Dan and Wall's point here, I think the board hired Ms. Hodge to give us the bottom line recommendations on what's really going on here. It's not about so much, do we have the right policy? That certainly that's a part of it. But did we do the right thing at the right time And if not, we want to know the specifics of it. And if there's actions that we need to take, we're all committed to taking those actions. We also asked Fox Rothschild to have some type of report here at the end for public consumption. It may in fact be redacted of certain names or certain, especially if there's minors involved and there's the law that protects these things. But you, the public, have a right to know if there was recommendations for improvements, if there was recommendations for bad actors, and if we have taken action on them. So I think that is a completely reasonable request to the board and a completely reasonable deliverable to come out of this at the end. Whatever, and we told Kelly to go wherever this leads. There's no scope that says here's the four walls you're looking at. It is you're doing these interviews and you're following the path where it leads, and then you're reporting back to us. So I just wanted to make that clear. To Dan's point and Nepal's point, we're expecting to understand what goes on here, and we're expecting, if in fact there's action that needs to be taken, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that action. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
And then
And
Lydia,
yet-
before you close up, just so the public's aware, Ms. Hodge's presentation is on the agenda, the public agenda, so they can go in and view it. They can also get right to her contact information that's on the last slide. So just so the public can find it.
Exactly how I was going to close this out. So.
No, sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. That's
Sorry,
fine.
Lydia.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And also, I believe that there's information on our website too, correct? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Any final questions, comments from the committee before we move on to people services and special education?
No, I just welcome Ms. Hodges' expertise. Glad to have her.
Look forward
Thank
to
you
working
for
with you.
joining us, Kelly. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I will obviously be in touch. And good luck or best wishes to all of you, especially for the 4th of July. So have a good evening.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right, I'll hand it over to Leslie for people services and special education.
All right, we've got People Services. So this is myself, Kathy DiMarino is Vice Chair, John Melnizak, and Jennifer Munson. If you can turn on your cameras, perfect. All right, so first up we have 3.01 is the Crime Victims Center training. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Joe Myers. He is from the Crime Victims Center. If we can get his video and mic up. Perfect.
Good, hey, good evening, everybody. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Jim.
Awesome. Yes. Cool. Good evening. My name is Joe Myers. I am, as you heard, with the Crime Victim Center of Chester County. We were asked to come in and help out with some training, so I'm going to take an opportunity to go over a little bit about what we discussed, and hopefully be able to feel good about that moving forward. So we'll open up for questions after that. One of the main trainings, the trainings we discussed were both for faculty, professionals at the school, and for students. So mentioned before was our 3-hour mandated reporting training, which is an Act 126 certified training here in Pennsylvania. It goes over PA specific laws about mandated reporting. It goes over the history of child protective services in both the United States and in Pennsylvania specifically. Talks about the 10 types of child abuse in Pennsylvania, an overview of adverse childhood experiences, and we go through all the reporting processes. Me and my staff are trained at facilitating this specific training for professionals in the community and for volunteers. We have years of mandated reporting experience under our belt, so we provide local expertise on making mandated reports so that we can continue to be a resource for all of you at the Owen J. Roberts School District. In addition to that, we talked a lot about our sexual harassment in the workplace prevention curriculum called Respect at Work, which was designed by the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, to go beyond just checking a box for sexual harassment training, but to get into culture change in an organization that moves beyond just looking at illegal harassment and at what builds a respectful workplace for everybody working there. The hope for that is to engage your staff and faculty in creating that healthy workplace that then trickles out into the community with your students, with your sports teams, with all those folks. This training is bystander focused, looks at being able to respectfully engage with your colleagues to prevent what could move from disrespectful into a form of violence. As far as children's programming or programming for the youth of the Owen J. Roberts School District, over the last year, y'all participated in the Safe and Healthy Communities Initiative here in Chester County, where we provided a 1-hour puppet program for your second grade students called Safe Touches, which is a child body safety program that looks at preventing child sexual abuse by teaching children the safe and not safe touches and how they can identify those and who they can talk to if something were to be not safe for them. That goes really well with our mandated reporting training, as it sharpens the skills of your teachers as mandated reporters. We also have some plans to expand those types of programming. Crime Victim Center facilitates body safety conversations for children K through middle school. We also talk about boundaries with late elementary and middle school students, as well as high school students, moving into healthy relationships, both with their peers and with adults in their life. So these are all programs that we have listed out on our website. And we can talk more about what those look like. But our hope is that we'll be able to implement a lot of these programs for your students, if not this school year, in the coming school years as well, as we have done in the past. We've partnered with Owen J. Roberts School District for a while, and now we're hoping just to be very strategic in that partnership to make sure that we're reaching your students, your faculty, and your community. We also offer a 2-hour program called Stewards of Children, which is a child sexual abuse recognition and prevention program that's really designed for the general community. That is currently being offered online as an online module. My colleague, Melissa Zimmerman, facilitates those twice a week. So if you have any interest in viewing that program, it's completely free. It's scheduled a couple different times a week, and you can find all that information on our website, which is cvcofcc.org. Or you can just Google Crime Victim Center. That's probably easier than tripping over all those C's. I think I kind of ran through a lot of that stuff, but our hope is that we want to build out our partnership with Owen J. Roberts to help positively shape the culture, to build on a lot of the positive things that you and your teachers have been doing for a long time, and hopefully to address anything that could be negative in that space.
Thank you, Joe. And then just so the public's aware, everything that you detailed is listed on the public agenda so the public can see it, and they can see what grade level, as you had mentioned, we teach. Also, what we will be doing for the staff, and the mandated reporting we're going to be doing this year will be in-person mandated reporting versus that online module that we've done in the past. And then also, can you just give, just so that everyone's aware, because I feel like the more information you have, the better. What exactly is mandated reporting? Because we had some questions about, sharing reports from mandated reporting. I just want to understand, the all of that's involved, where that goes, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. So in the state of Pennsylvania, any adult who has significant contact with children, so that can be a teacher, a professional, a volunteer, anybody who works for a school district is considered a mandated reporter. So what that means is anytime that adult has a reasonable suspicion or reasonable cause to believe that a child is experiencing abuse, they don't have to know the abuser, they don't have to know anything else. If they have a reasonable cause to suspect that a child is being abused, they are obligated to make a report to Childline, which is the Pennsylvania Central Reporting Agency for Child Abuse. The mandated reporter, whether they're a teacher, a principal, a bus driver, someone who works in food services, they are the person who's obligated to make that report to the state. So that's where that goes. Now, their identity is kept private by the state. They may work with law enforcement or local investigators to supplement their report or help with that. But in general, their names are not shared with the community to protect their safety. And that's simply because the bar for making a mandated report is a reasonable cause to suspect. It's incredibly rare for a mandated reporter to witness abuse. It's incredibly rare for a mandated reporter to 100% know it's happening. The bar for making a report is based on their knowledge, training, and experience. So we always say that it's more than a hunch, but less than a certainty. If someone has that reasonable cause, they're obligated to make that report. Protecting their identity from the public helps to, if their report wasn't founded, right? We want to make sure that mandated reporters feel safe knowing that when they make a report, many other public folks won't know who they are, or else they may feel pressure to not make the report. Sometimes, well, what we do know is that abusers are oftentimes important people to their victims, someone that they know. So that also means that a mandated reporter might know their abuser as well. So we want to make sure that those folks are protected and feel empowered to make their report. Kind of went for a walk on that one, Leslie. Was that answering your question?
That was good. That was good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else from the committee have any questions for Joe or any questions about the training?
Yeah, I have a question. Is there a way we could go through this training so we can see, exactly what others are receiving as far as information? Because I see these titles and these descriptions and they're nice, but if I could go through a training process and to see exactly how we're teaching both the staff and the students, that would give me a better idea of just the entire process.
Absolutely, John. I'd love to schedule something. I supervise our prevention and education efforts. So if you, as the school board or a committee, wanted to see some of this stuff, I could schedule a demo and y'all could go through it. It would technically train you as well, which is very useful for your mandated reporting obligations.
Okay, that's cool. And now what about the programs for the students?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing? Could I visualize? Okay.
If you would like, we could absolutely facilitate some for you or facilitate some of the activities so you get an idea. Generally, they're 40 to 60-minute programs that are developmentally appropriate for the children's age. So for you as an adult, you may not get the same experience out of it that the children will, but we would absolutely love to share anything we can to make you feel confident in our ability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Kathy or Jennifer?
Not for me. I agree with John that it might be helpful, especially since we have a lot of newer members on the board, to have us go through a mandated reporter training.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Marchini said as well, anything we want to take a look at, we can certainly do so as a committee, as a individual. We can do so.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate you going through everything and really looking forward to partnering with you guys more this year.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, Leslie, can I ask Joe a question before we say goodbye? My question, Joe, is, kind of being new to this whole, I'm getting educated on this stuff. Does your content specifically address, let's say for middle schoolers and high schoolers, the process of grooming and how to recognize it when it's happening, let's say to a friend of yours, or because sometimes I think that's probably the closest connection that could catch it at its early stages?
Absolutely. Starting very young, we talk about the importance of being a bystander. So that means recognizing not just when you're going through a hard time, but the important people in your life are. So as students approach that middle school age, we recognize that they start to retract from speaking to folks like their parents or guardians, or sometimes their teachers who they might turn to for help. So what we want to do is provide them with the skills and the knowledge to recognize if people in their lives are going through a hard time. So that includes grooming, right? Recognizing if an authority figure or an adult is pushing an unhealthy or unsafe boundary. So that's something we absolutely do cover with young folks to give them as many tools as possible for making their community safe. At the end of the day, it takes all of us, the school community, the families, and the students themselves, all paddling in the same direction to make the community as safe as possible.
Thanks very much.
And then, sorry, one comment. The Stewards of Children, we did do this, was it last year with, it was with Deb Ryan, right?
Correct.
Okay. We didn't have a very high turnout this past year, but I hope that we have a much higher turnout. I thought it was a lot of great information that she shared. And, as someone who coaches in the community, I thought it was really, really great information to understand.
Yeah, we love that program as a jumping off point for folks. Like it's great for the general community, like parents, community members who just have a concern or thought. We would love if they went through that because that starts the dialogue for getting it moving in a general community sense. So absolutely, we would love to do more of those for your community, for your families.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Joe. All right, guys, we're going to move on to 3.02. Dr. Lloyd, I believe this is you. This is the health and safety plan, the working draft.
Yes, I think it would, as we know, documents don't ever really project well. So if our board members would refer to the attachment in board docs, and our community can access it through the agenda also. So as we talked about, this is going to be ongoing. This is very flexible, the health and safety plan, and that we're going to be revising it as we are implementing it. So we're going to have this as a standing item for the committee, Pupil Services Committee on the Committee of the Whole every month, so that you're able to see what revisions we are making. They'll appear in red, as you can see on the very first page. The wording of the document needed to be refined. If you scroll down through the document, we will be continuing. I'm on pages 6 and 7. We will be continuing to add folks that are collaborating with us on the development of the health and safety plan as we go. Then we have made a few additions with regards to cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilating on page 10. We added some information for summer programs only, limiting the number of students per seat on the school bus, staggered with seating filled from the back to the front. As feasible, students from same families may sit together. So as more information is shared with us from various organizations, we will be updating the plan, and our transportation provider is one of those sources that are adding information to our plan as well. Here's where you see for the summer programs, because this is the plan that's only for summer programs, athletics, and activities that are taking place this summer. The community will have the opportunity to be providing input into the plan for the fall. So for the summer programs, there's a bus monitor. The students that we're busing in the summer are for our ESY, our special education students. So we do have a bus monitor on those buses in the summer. That is not something that we typically have during the school year. That individual will be encouraging students to wear their face masks if we cannot social distance while on the school bus. We'll be changing out the school buses so that we're not using the same bus for the elementary run as we do for the secondary run. That was on page 11. Moving on to page 12, we've added some detail about how we're cleaning our athletic equipment. Right now we're operating in green. This plan is for both yellow and green because it's going to be important to be able to move back and forth as we go through the summer. So you'll notice that wording is revised in both categories. We're added information on how we will be sanitizing the athletic equipment as well as the locker rooms and the training rooms, and monitoring that area. We've using some grant money to buy some additional equipment there. Moving on to page 13, we've added some additional language. The board will see more information coming out. I provided you with a draft from the Chester County Health Department for their plan for reopening schools. And so we will begin to incorporate their language into our plan as well. Here's where you start to see this language about target of 3 feet between student desks when feasible. Originally, In yellow phase, we're looking for 6 feet. Now that we're in green, there's a recommendation coming out from the various health departments that could be reduced down to 3 feet. So we've added that language in. We'll be adding more language in.
Is that just Chester County that's recommending that? Because that seems to be at odds with the CDC recommendation.
And so what we're seeing, Paul, is Bucks County. They were the first county to come out with their individual recommendations. It is our understanding as superintendents that we're going to start to see the recommendations from the state also be adjusted. So our plan has to take into consideration CDC, state, and county. And so we're weaving that language in there so that we're not just continuously saying feasible, because feasible seems too vague. And so we're putting in a little bit more detailed language there.
A follow-up question also would be, we should look at the language that we've got in CDC and these other places to see whether the distance is between the edges of the desk or between the students, because you could get the same measurement if you measure 6 feet between students and 3 feet between desks if there's 1.5 feet of desk on either side of the student, right?
You are correct. And I would like to tell you that there's detail there, but there's not detail always about that. So we're incorporating that in there. I think we will be hearing a little bit later about the plan for how we'll be seeking input from parents in a rather unique way. So that everybody can see what does 3 feet between students look like, what does 3 feet look like between desks, and what does 6 feet look like between desks.
Right, and my assumption is that the parents will be more focused on the distance between students than the distance between desks.
Between desks, right.
So if we can define it properly so that it has the proper distance between students, we should be hopefully okay. And I assume also that we've started to go through the process of evaluating which spaces are not going to have enough room.
We have, our principals have already started looking at their classrooms and what furniture will have to be removed from classrooms in order to be able to achieve these guidelines. And I know the principals started to communicate that out to teachers as well.
Sorry for the interruption.
So
it's all right.
Just as we're going through this, staff wear masks, face shields here on 14 when in the school building, and then there's a qualifier added, and proper social distancing cannot be maintained. So are staff required to wear masks and shields while in the building, or only under some circumstances? It seems like this is a lesser standard almost.
That's correct, Paul. What you're seeing is reflecting the changes that we're starting to see from the Chester County Health Department that are trying to give more flexibility to teachers, and that if they are able to be teaching and there's 6 feet between them and the first row of students, that they could remove their mask. As we talked about before, it's going to be really important, particularly for our elementary students, to be able to see the mouth of their teacher. And so this is giving some more flexibility to when the teacher or the adults can remove their masks and still be properly social distanced.
And is that's backed up by science? Because that seems not, from my understanding, and this would be a concern of mine, to remove masks at 6 feet apart, because I've not seen any science that I've seen that would back that up. So as we mitigate this, I start getting concerns with this plan. I'll just let you know that.
I would agree, Paul. I mean, the studies I've seen is just that 6 feet is not enough if you're in a confined space, because the teacher will be talking continuously, and therefore those particles will be coming out and dispersing throughout the entire classroom. So I'm also kind of uncomfortable with teachers, again, except for elementary school teachers or in other special instances. But in most cases, I would still prefer if the teachers would ask.
And if you're not comfortable with this wording at this time, we can remove it. The state distributed like a 600-page report late last week, and so I was on vacation when that report came out. So I will be reviewing that, and the research specific to Pennsylvania is in there. So if you're not comfortable with this being in here at this time, we can remove this. But this is the language that is coming from the Chester County Health Department.
Maybe let's remove it for now, and we can take another look at it.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and if we have recommendations from the state and county where they are afraid to put undue burden on a school district, but it wouldn't really be an undue burden on our school district, I think we could have slightly more, we could have a higher standard. We don't have to just meet the minimum requirements.
Yeah, I think that's the best course of action in light of what we're seeing in Texas and Florida and the bouncing back here. If we can, I understand there's face shields that can be in place of masks, but I don't think we should be walking backwards this in any way and mitigating any of the steps that we've taken in the plan that we just recently approved. I think we should stick with the plan we approved, see how things go. And then I'm really concerned that if we're going to make any mitigations or any lesser standards coming in, I just want to see that it's scientifically backed up.
Did I, when I was on vacation, did I send you the article about the great face mask debate?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I remember you sending the Chester County stuff when it came out.
All right. I will, I'll look and see. I'll resend it to you, but we'll remove that at this time.
And if you have that guidance from the state that you said you just recently got, that might be helpful for us to see as well.
I would be happy to send you the 600 pages.
In the mail, please.
My computer will crash.
I'm sorry, there's no cliff notes yet.
Well, maybe you could just send the highlights.
Yeah. It's on my list of things to do here.
And did you say that in the yellow phase you're 6 feet apart, students, but in the green phase you go to 3?
Yes. Right. That's correct, John.
That kind of is, I don't understand how.
I don't get that either, John.
Yeah, it doesn't make.
Yeah, but in some places it's between desks, and in some places it's between students.
Yeah.
But we're saying it's a change in standard, Jennifer, right? So if it's either changing or it's not changing. If we are already 6 feet between students and we're not changing that, fine. But if we're saying, and if this is just another way of stating the same standard, that's different. But it just reads as another way that we've now taking and we're taking green and saying, oh, okay, we're okay. Let's relax our standards more. Where I think I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, and logistically, I don't think we want to be rearranging school classrooms to go back and forth between green and yellow if it were to flip-flop back and forth. That just sounds like a lot of maintenance work. Maybe I'm overanalyzing, but
it's good.
Are you guys questioning that we should try to take out the 3 feet and go back to 6 feet? Because I don't know that's because the wording was when feasible, and I'm thinking that's not feasible.
Right. So we would need to understand when it's not feasible to do 6 feet, and then evaluate whether there's sufficient reason to change that for the green phase. Because if there's no reason to change it for the green phase, we may as well leave it if it's 6 feet, right?
Well, I'm just saying I don't think that 6 feet would be feasible under any circumstance, would it?
This is for the ESY for the lesser kids.
Exactly. Even so. I think.
These are smaller groups of students.
So you think 6 feet would be feasible for a room even with that few students? Okay. I was under the impression that 6 feet between desks would have maybe 8 kids in a room, maybe at the max. Is that correct?
It's correct. It would have about 10 to 12 students in a room, depending on.
Okay, but that
on
might be workable
which
for
building
the SY.
that you're talking about. So.
Right, and I think we need to understand, is it actually 6 feet edge to edge from the desks, or can we define it as 6 feet between the student chair and the student chair? Right?
All right. We'll define that better for you. All right. I'm now on page 18. This is where it talks about the middle school and high school. So the language is repeating itself. And so if you're not comfortable with it being in the elementary level, then we'll remove it from the high school and middle school level as well. This is just talking about on page 18, the distance between the student desks. If we go down to page 22, this is the middle school and high school athletics and activities. We received additional information from the PIAA, and so we're just including that under practice guidelines under yellow, but we're in the green phase now, so that doesn't apply with limiting the number of students at the moment. But in the yellow phase, the maximum number of participants at one time would need to be 25, including the coaches and the players. If you scroll down to page 23, some additional language coming out from the PIAA with limiting the sharing of materials among students. Only coaches, players, and staff are permitted. No spectators are permitted. I think we need to adjust that header, that column heading. But there's no spectators according to the PIAA at this time. So we're bound by their guidelines. We are recommending the revisions to the language regarding the training room in the yellow phase, limiting the number of students in the room at each time. We're in the green phase right now. And so the use of the spaces when needed and practice social distancing when possible. These are some smaller areas that our athletes use. And so we're going to need to be mindful of the number of students that are in there and the way that we're sanitizing those areas. And then down on page 29, this is the language coming out of the Chester County Health Department about wearing masks. Wearing masks will not be required of students while in school, but will be optional. Students will be encouraged to wear masks on school buses when social distancing cannot be maintained.
I guess my surprise there is that there's no distinction between a student sitting in a classroom versus a student in transit. Because when you look at, the number of potential people that a student could come in contact with in transit would be when they would be coming in contact with the most people. So I'm kind of surprised that we didn't get any language coming from the county making a distinction between encouraging when they're in transit, like going through hallways and to bathrooms.
There is, we didn't include it in this plan because this is the summer plan,
right?
Not the fall plan, and the passing in the hallway is they're not in the hallways.
Okay.
There's one group
right.
in the hallway that might be going to a large group area, but they're not. It's not like in a regular school setting. during ESY. But yes, there is language that we will be looking at for the fall plan.
Will we have masks available for kids and staff at the school?
Well, that has not been decided, Paul. We definitely will have masks for our employees. I mean, we're required to provide our employees with that, or they can provide their own. But because we're requiring our employees to wear them, we have to provide them. With students, what I'm hearing is some schools are asking parents to provide masks for their students so that they have them available, that in the event they're not able to properly social distance, they have the mask with them, and are able to, the teachers able to encourage them to put them on. We haven't tackled that yet.
My gut feel on that would be we should probably have some extra masks for the kids. And I'm sure teachers will and people will, but I would be, I'd encourage us to have some on hand for purposes of the students' use.
So those are the, just since we've started, and really it's athletics and just changes that came out from the health department. So I know that Kathy Soder is taking notes for us, and I'm sure she's captured your comments about what we will not be adding at this time. Any other thoughts or comments on the plan?
So we did have a question last meeting on the 15th about what we would do if students wanted to wear a mask and were bullied. I'm not sure if you want to address that at all.
Sure. And so I think it's always important to start with bullying is a repeated behavior. It's being mean on purpose repeatedly. And that it's going to start, we're going to have to start by educating our students that wearing a mask is a choice. And some students are going to choose to wear a mask, and it's not appropriate to make mean comments about a person who is choosing to keep themselves safe. So we're going to have to start with educating, and that this is a choice, and that we're going to have parents that are going to want their children to wear masks. But just like any repeated mean behavior that students inflict on each other that we're aware of, we'll address it with our regular discipline system, because it's not okay to be mean to someone else, and it's definitely not acceptable to be mean on purpose repeatedly, because that's bullying. So we will have to address it right from the beginning, that wearing a mask is a choice, and it's a choice to be respected.
Regarding that, I expressed some concern about athletics because I was listening to friends of mine talk about seeing students engaging in high intense exercise wearing masks with their coaches nearby. Now I know coaches are not supposed to be with their sports teams now, not until August, but this was not our district. So I just am wanting to clarify that coaches will not be allowing students to be sprinting and doing highly intense exercise with face masks on in 90-degree heat this summer, or they will not be encouraging that behavior, because I think that's very dangerous. I know there's a lot of pressure around mask wearing, and I just would not want our kids to be at risk in that way, thinking that this is something they should be doing.
And so to sort of allay your fears, under that section for high school athletics and activities, and in that link that you click on, that are the guidelines from the PIAA and the NFHS, that is where that very specific language that I shared with you earlier today, and it's repeated in the Chester County Health Guidelines, that athletes should absolutely not be wearing face masks when they are engaging in rigorous physical activity. We are supposed to be assuring proper social distancing of our athletes, but that they're very clear that you don't want to impede the athletes' breathing or airways in any way. So I had to, after you texted me this morning, I had to go down to the field to make sure that our football players indeed were not wearing masks. But our coaches have already been trained in these guidelines and the PIAA and NFHS guidelines as well. They had to sign off, and then all of the athletes were trained in the information shared with parents, so that people are aware, because that is not safe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And any of us who've gone to the grocery store know it's actually very hard to see with your face covered, and so that also could be a danger.
I wear
No visibility.
Glasses fog up with masks. Dr. Lloyd, would you have any concerns with shifting the language a hair for our students to instead, and this is more, I would say, for fall, so I might be getting ahead of myself, but the language around the school recommends that students wear masks, and then if you choose not to, there shouldn't be no, not bullying, but, you know, making fun of.
Shaming.
The reason I ask that is because I feel like if we go out with saying it's your choice if you want to, then it's almost like we're encouraging it that it's different to wear instead of it's okay to wear.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Lydia. I think that makes a lot of sense to say, you know, we're recommending it and we encourage you to wear it. You don't have to, but, you know, it's something we could recommend. I like that.
There are parents who might not want them to or care about that, but I would also, I mean, I haven't read the 600-page report, and I would rely on your expertise around here, but I do know with the green from a business perspective, so I don't know how they delineate for schools. From a business perspective, when we're in the green, we are still to continue to telecommute as much as possible. Business, when going into a business, you must wear a mask, still in the green. So it would concern me that if we weren't, you know, following along those lines.
And I view it very much the same way that we, you know, when we give a kid food for lunch, we give them the fruits and the vegetables, but we don't punish them if they don't eat them. We need to recommend that they wear the mask, not punish them if they don't follow through. Like, that's kind of where my view of it is from a public health policy standpoint is.
Mine too.
Okay. And this is our policy. So I mean, not our policy, but our plan. And it needs to reflect, you know, the interests of the board and the community. So we can do that, because we certainly are hearing a lot about that, and that people are forgetting that we're in a green phase. We're not out of this. And that green does not mean that we don't social distance and we don't wear masks at all. And we have to sort of keep reminding ourselves and everybody else that it's not until we are completely have no fake color, no faces, are we out of this by any stretch. And it is important that we're reinforcing that
Thank you.
healthy behavior. So
thank you.
All right, anybody have anything else?
I just have one last question on this, Susan, on the county with contact tracing. Is that going to be put on the school's responsibility as we get sicknesses, or are we pushing that off to the county, or do we have to designate and call parents and let them know someone on a school bus got sick and contact trace, or is that something that gets pushed out to the county health department?
It's my understanding, Mr. Friel, that is going to be put on the schools. It wasn't back in March, but that a certain amount of that is going to be put on schools. We only were contacted once by the Chester County Health Department, and we had to provide a class list. It's going to be more than that. I understand in the fall that it would be the class list, the bus list, all of the teachers that the student would have come in contact with, or vice versa, all of the students that a teacher would have come in contact. And then, yes, it'll be on us to notify the community or the school community of that. So.
And I guess if they were exposed, they would self-quarantine still for 14 days. And if that's the case, how do we transition those kids to something online?
So that is what Dr. Soder's going to talk a little bit about here tonight, because we're going to need to have that flexibility. So we would have our brick and mortar school. Okay, you're in school. Then we're putting together the Cyber Academy option. So you're either in or you're out choices, but we're going to have students that are quarantined. And so they're going to have that in and out model. Some schools are calling that their hybrid model, so that the student can still be home. They may only be quarantined and healthy, but we still want them to be able to access their education. And so we're going to need to be able to offer that. So I think she's going to talk about that with all of you tonight, because we definitely have to have that. And we need to plan for it for sure.
I just have a couple of comments to offer. One to the committee is I think that you all are going to have to think about what authority you're going to look to, whether it's county, whether it's state, whether it's federal, because my guess is you're going to be able to find different answers all over the place. So I think, thinking about a prudent order that you would look to would help everybody kind of understand the process, because largely I think we're trying to follow some policy from somebody. It's not like we're making it up. So that would help me. And then the only other question, Dr. Lloyd, for you is, what's the process with the fall plan? Like when do we, I'm sure you probably already started a fall plan, but formally, when can parents look at that? When do we accept public input, all that stuff? Or am I front running the question?
I believe that's the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
That we're going to talk about.
I'll go dark again, sorry.
Read your agenda, John.
But to Mr. Deal's point, the reason that we're starting to see counties come out with reopening school plans is to give schools more direction instead of it being so ambiguous from either the state or from the CDC. And so that's why we're starting to see the counties taking the bull by the horns. We, as superintendents, had asked that the state do it at their level, and it's just not occurring. And so now we're starting to see the counties come out with their own information, which is trying to sort of marry the CDC and the state's plan. What I sent you was the draft. As soon as we get the final information, I'll be sharing that. I did see a crosswalk of that information on the template that we're currently using for our plan. So I'll be sharing that information out with all of you before we start to engage the community on their input. I think it's going to behoove us to have a clear understanding of what the county's plan is, and if we're in agreement with that, so that we have a starting point for our community discussions. So Leslie, I'll stop blabbing, and you can move on to your next item on the agenda. Thank you, everybody.
So item 3.03 is parent input survey for the health and safety plan. I believe we have Mr. Oswald for this.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can.
Good.
Are you gonna, there's your video.
So thank you for inviting me to speak briefly this evening on the parent input plan moving forward. And as Dr. Lloyd said, as we take a look at our current and existing plan that we're utilizing for our summer programming, it's important that we get input as we look at making revisions to the plan that we would have in place for fall. So committee of administrators worked along with Dr. Lloyd and Dr. Marchini to put a draft together of a plan to gather input. And really it comes down to twofold. The first is a survey, as Mr. Deal had inquired about. And so that survey would go out to all of our stakeholders. And of important mention would be those stakeholders who are involved in any kind of summer programming as well, since they would have an opportunity to see what the plan looks like. And so a survey option that goes out to elementary, middle school, and high school, because as you can imagine, all of our families at the different levels are probably coming at it from different perspectives. So survey goes out, and the survey is directly aligned with the plan. And so as our stakeholders complete the survey, they're looking at the plan and reflecting on the language, and answering the survey related to each of the sections of the plan. A portion of the plan also asks for input, particularly around if a stakeholder would like to be part of the focus group. So that's the second part of our plan to get feedback from our stakeholders. And so we felt it important that our stakeholders have an opportunity to participate in a focus group and actually come into the buildings, each of our 7 buildings, as well participate if they would like in a virtual focus group as well, to be able to come in to see what a classroom looks like with the desks separated appropriately. And so focus groups would be limited obviously to a number that would keep us in compliance with the current guidelines, but each of our 7 buildings would offer that. And then from those focus groups, we would get additional feedback. So in essence, the brief timeline would be the survey goes out. From that survey, focus groups are formed, and then each of our buildings hosts a focus group. There is one available online for anyone who could not participate in the live focus group. And we get an opportunity to reflect on the plan in those focus groups, bring all that information back to the table, and then use that feedback to revise our plan with the hope of being able to present it to the board obviously later this summer. So that's a brief synopsis or summary of our plan. But again, we understand the importance of getting feedback from our stakeholders. So with that, Mrs. Prophet, I believe I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee on this?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I would just say, looking at the way that the questions are structured, I see a lot of them say or opposed. But I'm a little bit worried that if somebody's opposed, we won't know if they're opposed because they feel that something is too lax or too stringent. So I'm wondering if we should consider changing those options so that it's very clear and somebody doesn't have to go into the additional comment section to make it clear whether they think that a section is too lax or too stringent.
Perfect. So that's part of the reason why we're sharing the draft of the survey with you, so we can receive your feedback on the language and the format of the survey.
So I have a question as well. I'm assuming that when they're looking at this survey and have the link to the plan, they're obviously looking at the plan that's really created for the summer, not necessarily created for the fall, and not necessarily workable for the fall. Back to that whole 6 feet apart desk thing, I noticed that question was on there about, whether you'd be satisfied or opposed or whatever with having 6 feet of separation for the students. However, I don't think would be feasible for the school year. So I'm just wondering, there's like a little confusion there about whether we're really looking at a plan that's going to work for the fall or not. We're really looking at a summer plan in some instances.
So there's definitely going to be some similarities and overlap, particularly around those large areas of the survey, and we felt like we needed at least a starting point or a baseline for parents to be able to look at and reflect on. But understood your point.
Have we ever considered getting a professional research firm to help us with designing surveys for actionable data? I guess, you know, and this is not specific to this, but some of the other surveys and things that we've done, very qualitative versus quantitative, but even within the qualitative, to Jennifer's point, it's unclear what we glean out of the information, the way some of the questions are phrased, or the bias, the leading part of the question. And so if we know what data we need to collect, what data is actionable, you know, I'm just wondering if maybe there isn't some expertise we could get from outside that could help us do that. For instance, questions that are like, you know, parent, instead of generalizing, you know, do you have before school daycare? How about what time do you leave for work? Do you leave between 7, 7:15, 6:30, 6:15? Do you have one or two parents who work from home? What, you know, we're trying to determine how kids are going to be impacted by transportation, what it is, and we want to have quality quantitative data that says, you know, 22% of our students have a before school issue that, you know, starts at 7 o'clock or whatever it is. I just fail to see how sometimes we get to that actionable data with some of our survey questions. So maybe not just sharing it with the board, but maybe there's some other resources out in the education world we could run this by to get a different take on it.
Well, and to that point, this particular plan doesn't actually ask a parent how enthusiastic they are about sending their child back to physically be in school. And we may see that the answers that people are giving are very slanted according to their current perspective. And so somebody
maybe adding like
really
a question of whether or not they're interested in sending their child back at the very beginning, so that you can kind of understand some of their thoughts.
Yeah, I think we need to understand, and this is where it gets very difficult, and you have to be careful about how you word the question, because you don't want to make it look like they're choosing an option now when they're not actually choosing an option. You know, but some indicator of whether they really want to send their child back no matter what, if they really don't want to send their child back no matter what, or some way of gauging in the middle.
Yeah, and with that, like you were saying, Jennifer, there's going to be some people, I think, that do not want to send their children back if those restrictions are too extreme. And some people will not want to send their children back if the restrictions are not extreme enough.
Right.
And so I think there's it would be good to know where people fall on that, whether or not they're not satisfied with things because they're too strict or whether they're too lenient.
Yeah, we need to know what the key issues are. Are masks, are the 6 feet distance, like are those make or break things, and for how many parents, I guess.
Todd, can you talk a little bit about the purpose of the survey and what the thinking was behind surveying people first before bringing the focus groups together?
Sure. Yeah. So the purpose of the survey group really was to guide and direct the discussion that would take place during the focus group. And part of that focus group, again, going back to what we said about having all those stakeholders here, holder group, or focus groups rather, to have a board member.
We lost you, Mr. Oswald.
Oh, he's back. Nope.
Sorry, you cut out. We missed part of what you said.
Oh gosh, and it was so good. Now, what I said was the survey really was providing us with those important discussion points to have during the focus groups. And during the focus groups, we would encourage at least one board member to join each of those focus groups. And so part of that would be then to have a qualitative discussion and to be able to capture those other important things that our stakeholders would like to share with us.
Yes, and I also do see on here, you do have lines where people can give additional feedback. So I guess they could be clarifying stances on certain questions.
Yeah, correct. Under each section, there is an opportunity for stakeholders to provide some narrative feedback. And then, what we would be doing would be sort of combing through the trends in that narrative section, looking for patterns and looking for themes that kind of emerge from the narrative sections.
I know I'm not on the committee, but can I ask a question? I wondering two things. If it wouldn't, maybe if that's the intent, if maybe the amount of detail this has might be scary to some, and we won't get as much responses as we would like. And if do we keep it higher and say and ask like what we would like to do focus groups? Would you be willing to be a part of a focus group? Please tell us your top 3 concerns about X, Y, and Z. Please tell us your top 3 reasons, positives, negatives, some way that it kind of gets at what you're trying to get at for the purpose of the focus groups and gets people to, it's a suggestion, I'm not necessarily saying that's the best way to go, but it's a thought.
Yep, no, it's a great suggestion.
My other question is, this is more of a suggestion. I think it would be really great if this time around, I don't know who this falls on, like Jennifer, Dr. Lloyd, the principals, that we send these out via email. If there is a way to also, I know we have our lists of things on our website, but is there a way to put a banner? I know we're working on a website, Dr. Lloyd, but is there a way to really gain attention to the fact that we want input from the community? And you're so great at tweeting, Dr. Lloyd, you could tweet a link to it, get it out in different ways than just our typical ways.
We certainly can try. That's for sure.
All we can do.
Can you remind me what the timeline was to get this out to people again?
So our timeline obviously is in draft form. We were looking at getting that out in the next few days, so our families have about a week or so to complete the survey, and then we can plan for those focus groups.
Because we're looking to hold focus groups across the district at all 7 schools. And so we're going to need the whole month to be able to do that. And then the different administrators are going to serve as facilitators of focus groups at all the different schools in the district. So it's going to take us quite a few weeks to be able to achieve that. But it's important to engage the different corners of the district. We have a lot more success when we go out into the community and try to engage folks who children attend West Vincent to go to West Vincent and go to their school and ask people to participate there the same way with the middle school and the high school, instead of trying to just do it at a central location. We tend to get a better response that way.
Okay.
So that's our thinking. We don't typically, to go back to Mr. Friel's question about engaging a third party to help us design our surveys, we don't typically do that because of the cost that's associated with it, but it's something that we could do if that is the direction that the board would like to see us go in.
I understand Paul's view on that, but in my mind, like you said, this survey seems to have a different purpose of just informing a focus group study, and I don't necessarily think we need to, look for statistical data on this at this time for this. That's just my opinion.
Maybe not statistical. We just need to make sure that we're getting the right information. And right now, I can't tell based on how these are structured, what would be the most important talking points and what does opposed mean? Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, and Kathy, that's a fair point in terms of, I'm not trying to suggest if there's a different purpose here, and certainly timelines is critical.
Yes.
I'm going to suggest, though, that because this is multiple surveys I've seen, and, I guess I've seen, so let me just back up. In my career side, I've done a lot of focus groups and surveys designed by research groups. So I've seen plenty of the stuff that's designed for consumer packaged goods or things like that, or in the business world. And certainly they tend to have a different structure and a different approach to doing these things. One thing I think might be beneficial for you guys is to have someone come in and consult with you, not to do the surveys for you, but maybe to give you guys some additional expertise as you're developing surveys in the future. So you can, as you're building them in-house, you can have some best practices and some clear researcher tips on how to get to some actionable data and some clarity in some of these things, and to avoid any, question biases that might be created in the way you frame things. And just kind of have someone who they do this for a living kind of walk you through how to develop this stuff. I think it'd be a beneficial, for the staff. And as you guys do a lot of these surveys, and we certainly want to get more information from our public and our constituents and our parents, I think there's an area for us to improve here in how we do that. So food for thought. It doesn't have to be done for this particular survey, but I do think it's worth an investment of your time to bring some folks in to help us as we do these internally.
Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Oswald?
Well, in terms of bias, I think this is very well worded in terms of not leading the parent to believe that they are supposed.
Jennifer, you're breaking up. I think was your comment about whether or not parents are interested in sending their kids back to school or not?
So it does have that strength going for it.
Sorry, Jennifer, you broke up. Was your comment about parents, whether or not they wanted their child to attend?
Saying that, whereas we may in previous surveys, okay, never mind if you're not, yeah,
I can hear you
go
now.
ahead without.
Video's off.
Yeah, now we hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just commenting that I think is a strength of this particular survey that it's not leading parents to believe they should be answering a certain way.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
But it's not biased. It's not imparting a bias to the person who's answering. I'm just not entirely sure that it's getting things floating to the top. It's just move on. Let's go to the next thing. All good.
All right. Sorry, Jennifer.
No worries.
You usually have a good connection. All right. So we've gone through all three. In light of time, I'm going to open up to one or two questions, and then we've really got to move on because we've got a lot of other items on the agenda. Is there any questions for pupil services on these three items at this time?
We have two hands. I'll start with the first one, Andrea Mandeville.
Okay.
Andrea, you are unmuted.
This is Andrea Mandeville from Township. So my questions are specifically regarding these focus groups. And one thing I noticed in the wording on the survey is that it said people will be picked. And that to me implies that you're going to look at who's on who wants to be in it and then choose people based on I don't know what. But that's a little disturbing to me because I think anyone who has input should be allowed to comment or be part of focus groups. And secondly, if I heard correctly, the focus groups will run through the month of July, which means that the report or however they get back, you get back to parents. I mean, are we not getting information till 2 weeks before school starts? There's parents who may have to go to work, who have to plan for things. I know we're on the fence whether we're sending our girls or not, because I'm worried. So those things are really just worrisome to me, that we have, 63 days of school to go, and we're kind of not really set up to go. Thank you.
So I'm not sure if Mr. Oswald's going to come back or not, but Dr. Lloyd, the focus groups, I think the online focus groups, the in-person focus groups, I know there was conversation about it being a specific amount of people. I don't remember them stating a specific amount of people for these particular focus groups. I think the in-person ones would have to be because of how many people you can have in there. But I'm not sure if you're able to comment on the other part.
And so the in-person focus groups, we're limited by the number of people we can safely social distance in a classroom, because we want parents to be able to experience what the classroom is going to be like for their children, and to be able to talk to us about things that perhaps we haven't thought about. We're looking through it from the lens of educators, where the focus groups, the parents will be looking through the lens of a parent. And so we will have, we have 5 elementaries. That means we have 5 principals that can facilitate and some central office administrators. So I think what they were saying is that it's not that they're picking and choosing people at all. It's that we may have to limit the number of people we can safely have. Because as we know, we can't gather more than 250 people. And we have to just be mindful of that. I don't think there was intent to pick or choose at all. I see, Mr. Oswald, you got your video back on.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. We're not in a position that we would want to pick and choose, but to that extent, we also know that, convenience is important as well. And so perhaps when a focus group is occurring, if a parent's not able to participate, there would also be the option for the virtual participation in the focus group.
Thank you. And then, sorry, go ahead.
You might have been going to address what I'm going to say, is that as the board knows, we only just got this information. And we are the first school in the pack to even have a plan that has been voted on by the board. And so we are moving as swiftly as we can possibly move to develop a plan. All school districts are in the same boat right now. And we are required to get input for stakeholders. So we're moving as fast as we can. And we want it to be meaningful for parents. And we don't desire to be at the last minute. If we are fortunate enough, we'll be bringing a revised plan to the board on July the 20th to look at. But we have a lot of work to do between now and then. And as the board also knows, they just keep sending more information. We just got another 600-page report that we've got to digest, and we've got to, work into the plan. So there's nobody is intentionally dragging their feet. We're doing the absolute best we can to get a plan, and I'm very pleased that we were able to get this plan for the summer, and that we can get our athletes back, and we'll be able to get band camps started here very shortly. Driver's ed's already started, so we're well on our way, but we're going to have to get more input from the community. Was that what you were going to talk about, Mrs. Prophet?
Yeah. No, thank you. Okay.
Next person is Heather McCreary.
Okay.
Heather, you are on mute.
So I just wanted to thank Paul for his comments about the surveys. We've had questions about surveys before, and I think it's time to take a look at them more in depth. But I am concerned when I hear you guys talking about not having a forum that has everybody on it, because we've talked in the past about equity between the elementary schools, And we also have the whole diversity topic, but when you split up the elementary schools, I can see down the road people having issues in terms of what elementary school gets this, another elementary school gets that. And I don't think that's really fair. We had 611 people on a Zoom meeting the other week, and I think you really need to work towards getting the town hall forum type and do the survey, but let people have a collective voice where they can interact with each other and with you guys. And I have another question on the survey. If you are going to send a survey out, because of the issues with the bus, are we going to look at the late start? Are we putting that issue to rest forever? Because I have a hard time listening to the comments about the CDC recommends this and recommends that when they also were solid on their recommendations of not starting before 8:30 p.m. And I think that's something that should be looked at now and not again. We've spent 5 years on that topic. But I think it's not fair to not look at that at this point, especially when we have the bus backup issue that's going to affect this whole community. Thank you.
All right, so surveys, duly noted. I think that's something we can continue to discuss and talk about as a board. The elementary, I understand that every elementary is different in terms of design, but I think that, you know, when things are looked at, I guess you guys are working together in terms of what elementary standards are going to be. Just they might vary per space with different elementary schools.
Exactly. And as you know, from visiting all the elementary schools, entering French Creek is very different than when you enter North Coventry, and the way all those drop-offs can take place and how students enter buildings, and are students going to use hand sanitizer when they arrive? Those are the kinds of conversations that we're anticipating parents want to have for us. And recognizing that all parents can't come to the school, we're going to do online forums as well as the in-person focus groups so that we can reach as many people as we can throughout the community.
Thank you. And then in terms of delayed start, I don't think that we're at the point right now where we can do something that impactful to the district, but I have it noted and I will bring it up for board discussion on July 20th, so the full board can weigh in. And then I think we have one more question, Paul, and then we got to move on.
Dina Sargent. Dina, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments or question. First one is my son is attending ESY in the high school this summer. So he's kind of like the guinea pig, I guess you could say, with the rest of the small group of students. My concern is that I've always encouraged my kids to wear their masks going out, and it's a requirement when we go into stores, restaurants, anywhere we go out in public. If we're not going to have that as a requirement in the school, so you're telling me that other students have the right not to wear a mask and possibly be a COVID carrier and share that with my son or any other students in the classroom. That, I think, is a really, really bad idea. That so goes against CDC, everything that the president, well, not the president, but other members of the government is saying, state officials are saying. Why would OJR say it's an option? You know, you don't have to wear it if you don't, you know, not really interested. The other thing that I wanted to say was I'm an educator as well. And, you know, you're giving the option for the students to not wear the masks and things of that nature. It's really hard in a classroom to keep them separated. I've been in the hallways for OJR, and it's like a mad dash to classroom. How are you as a school or a board going to keep these students so far apart? And these poor teachers who have to wear a mask all day long, that's really asking a lot of your teachers. Those are my comments.
Dr. Lloyd, do you want to address both of those?
So it's going to be challenging. Wearing a mask, we've heard, this is like the most hotly debated topic. That's why I'd asked you if I'd sent you the article. is wearing a mask. We've heard from many parents that will not be sending their children to school if they have to wear a mask. And we have students that are coming to ESY that have varying disabilities, and some of them will not be able to wear masks. It's a decision that I don't think we can mandate. We can mandate it for our employees and require our employees to wear masks, but for our students, it really seems like it comes down to more of a parental choice for whether or not they want their child to wear a mask. And maybe the board members feel different and want to weigh in on it.
Well, I
Drop
mean,
down one by one.
I'll weigh in on that because, you know, we mandate that students get vaccines when they come in. So we do have choices as far as mandating certain policies. So fall's coming in, and we're going to be discussing this a lot. But you know, I'm leaning towards, you know, trying to get the kids to trying to get as many kids as possible to wear masks. So that's
encouraging, but not mandating.
encouraging. Yeah. Well, encouraging, yes. Mandating, but
Do we have
in certain cases.
My video hasn't started yet, but and this is Lydia. Do we have, again, we have to read the 600-page guidance and getting ahead of ourselves because we'll have focus groups, we'll get parental opinions. But I'm wondering if the guidance clearly states this or not, because again, from a business perspective, what I had, and I'm very close to this from a business perspective, all employees and must wear masks, and anybody visiting a business must wear masks. So I find it hard to believe that it would be different for education. Now, that might cause a lot of parents to say, I don't want my kid wearing a mask all day, I'm not sending them. And that's the choice. But the flip side is you don't have to wear a mask, it's your choice, and then parents aren't sending because it's not required. So either way, I feel like we have to, back to what John Deal said earlier, is pick our guiding force. Whose direction are we going to be taking on this? And then stick with that. And then from there, it's parental discretion. I mean, if you haven't been able to tell by now, I'm a proponent of masks. But that's a parental choice of mine, unless guidelines say businesses, schools, you must wear masks, then we should follow that. Or they say it's up to you, then we follow that. So we have to find who that guiding principle is first.
I think that's right, Lydia. And to John's point earlier, it's this, and to Dina, I think you make valid concerns, but it's not just O&J Roberts, you know, making this decision. This is the state, the PDE, along with the county, along with all the other school districts, and trying to figure out what the best thing that we can do here. I think one thing we could do is model best practice, whatever that is, and whatever science guides us. We're probably not going to be in a position to mandate it, but we could be in a position to highly encourage it. Certainly with all our employees, we can mandate it. With our students and on the bus rides, you know, I think we could have mask availability for everybody. We could have certain protocols. And I think this is an area for parents to weigh in on prior to the start of the school year. I think this is one of the key areas that parents should weigh in on, and the community should speak. And we're, you know, and as representatives of the community, we're going to listen to that feedback on both sides of this issue. But ultimately, you know, it's more than just O&J Roberts making this decision. It's going to be the state and the county going to weigh in heavily on this. But in all cases, we can model the best practice, and we can have available to us those tools that allow us to have masks in place at all times and have them available for kids. So, you know, we can have a bias towards it, certainly as an organization.
And we can talk about this. I'm sorry, guys. We can talk about this when it comes up again on July 20th. But we've definitely got to move on because it is.
Yep.
We're not even on
move on.
All right, so item 4 is review of board discussion procedures. So the first item is we want to discuss how to best move forward with public comment. It's really important to establish a best practice for public comment and questions received at a regular board meeting. Personally, what I would like to see is for committee chairs to answer questions if the topic pertains to their area. If you don't have all the information, take the person's contact information and follow back up. I think if a question continues to be asked, we should find a better way to address it. But wanted to open up to everyone else to see what everyone else's thoughts are for public comment.
Oops. I'm not on, am I?
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, I'll get my face on the moment. I think that plan's a good plan. I think we're trying to do that now, and I would like to see us proceed doing that. And we have in the past referred to it as discussion and follow-up, and I think that's a very good plan going forward. That's my opinion. I'll get my face on as well as my voice.
Well, I do think it's really great to try to address many comments, but I don't like when we have a meeting like we had last time where there was, you know, so many comments that I would just resist the urge to want to answer every comment and then not be able to hear all the comments and have to cut people off. So I think that, you know, maybe we need to have an idea that we address comments as we can. And then there has to be a point where we need to maybe pivot. And I guess, Leslie, this would fall on you to, you know, say, okay, we can't respond to any more comments, but we want to finish as many hands raised as we can, or something of that matter or that nature, because it's just not feasible to answer every comment, but we certainly want to hear them, and we can come back with answers later. So I just don't think it's necessarily one size fits all answer.
I think the other challenge is this whole virtual meeting. When we're in person, everyone's able to sign in, give their contact info, and you can follow back up with them. Right now, it's not possible. So we have to also establish how to get contact info from people, whether that's directed into our board secretary, how we want to do that.
So, Leslie, would it be helpful, I think, too, when we get into the public comment, because the other practice we have, and I think it's different between this meeting, which is the committee meetings, where we tend to have more discussion and back and forth with the folks in the public. And we, you know, before COVID, we were having pretty active discussions at committee meetings. Board meetings are a little more structured, and we've done most of the discussions in a committee meeting. So I think we really just got to encourage and tell, you know, I know there's 100 or so people on tonight. This is the meeting for public comment more so than the board meetings, because we tend to have already discussed things in detail and are taking a vote at the board meeting. And maybe we turn it into a Q&A instead of that 3 minutes of talk, because it's hard if someone's throwing, you know, 3 minutes of stuff they want to get, you know, make known to you. That's a lot to try to respond to Kathy's point, if there's, you know, a bunch of folks in line to do that and allow them all to get through that. But if we had one of those instead of public comment, just a straight up Q&A, like you get a question, and if we can, you know, or 2 questions, you know, just quickly ask them and we can answer them and try to clarify them. I think that's a good format, maybe a little more time, you know, sensitive. It'd be easier to do that versus a 3-minute piece. So I don't know, just food for thought.
You know what?
The other thing is post the responses and a little more detail on our, when we do our meeting minutes follow-up, just posting a little bit more, like here was the question and here's a little bit more detailed answer versus just the highlights in the board minutes. Something that people then can share, you know, honestly, you can cut and paste and share it on Facebook a little easier than trying to just post stuff.
Yeah, we can definitely look at our meeting minutes and see how we can add in more to that, because that goes out to everyone in the district. So if maybe someone has the same question, they can check that out.
That brought something else to my mind, what Paul said there. You know how at a regular business meeting, there's time to comment on agenda items. Well, maybe we would consider, if there's questions that come up at that time, answering them because they're obviously pertinent to that very meeting. And then public comment at the end can be on any topic. And honestly, that a lot of topics probably come up that we don't have answers to at that moment, because they could be things that we've not even discussed or heard about, or a problem comes up that we just need to know about. So maybe we want to, kind of focus on that earlier comment period as maybe being able to answer questions, as best we can.
Try to answer that as well. I think if we get a lot of comments from that portion, more than questions, so we can see what happens.
Leslie, I would say it's important to utilize the school board email, right? Because I think I speak for all the board members. We read the emails, but so the public knows, it's practice of the board, and it has been practice of the board, that the board president responds to the emails. So I know sometimes we get emails like, I emailed this a week ago and Ms. Profit is the only one who responded. Well, that's because it's our practice, right? Because she speaks for the board. But I think, Leslie, based on what you just said, that being able to delegate those issues that come in through email to the committee chairs so that they could have a dialogue with someone. I don't think we have to wait for a public meeting. Otherwise, example tonight, which we haven't even had that much public comment, we're going to have 5-hour meetings. And I don't think anybody wants that either.
Right.
So to utilize the school board email, I think is a very useful way. And, provided those arguments or questions are made respectfully and really with intent, I think that's a really good way to communicate with us as a board and the individual committees that do the work.
I think that's a good point. I think adding that to the meeting minutes and saying, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to the board, things like that, just to kind of highlight the how to contact us.
Leslie, I would also suggest, I know we talked about this in the past, and Jen, you were working on it, but adding on the board's main page, what is the committee of the whole meeting? And as Paul was saying earlier, that's where, please be ready to have dialogue, et cetera. And the difference between that and the board business meeting, which is, and what that looks like. And then actually, John, you just brought up a really good point where it has the link for the email all board of school directors. It might be great to even just have a little blurb there to let them know that they will hear from the most times you'll hear directly back from the president on behalf of the board, or you'll be directed to a committee chair. So that way, if they only hear from one of us, they understand why.
We have done that in the past. We have directed comments directly to a committee chair at times. Not often, but when it's pertinent and when it's more answerable. So that is not brand new, but not often utilized.
And we did start the FAQ. I believe we still have it as a Google Doc that the entire board has access to view. So whenever we decide that we're ready, I believe we can turn that over to have it added to our webpage. So I'll go look at that. I think your points, Lydia, are good.
I don't know if it'd be helpful to have like someone like Jackie, like our secretary, to take a look at it, just to make sure it's accurate, and then we could have Mr. San Francisco add that to the website.
And we can also put a statement on the school board page how the responses will be sent out from the president. They will either come from the president or the committee chairs, or they could be deferred to the superintendent as well. Sometimes it varies depending on.
And maybe adding that in as well, that if we need support from the administration team for answering a question, that they could be added into an email. So I know I've had to do that a few times because there were very specific questions. Anyone else have any thoughts? All right, so what I'm hearing is we're gonna try to move forward with answering questions when they're brought up at public comment. We'll try to start adding more of these answers into the meeting minutes so that the public can follow along. We're gonna try to get that FAQ up on the website, more description on how to email the board, just so that if people can't get into the public comment, or that if they would prefer emailing it in and getting a more descriptive answer, they can. Is everyone good with that? We'll give this round a try and see what happens. And if we feel like we're not able to answer everyone or give, adequate answers, we can come back and readjust.
Sounds good.
Good.
All right, so next topic then is in-person meetings. We just need to talk about when we want to move back to in-person and what that's going to look like for live streaming. Now, I did have a conversation with Paul because Springford was able to do it via Zoom. They had the entire board in the room, and they were able to stream it through Zoom until, because I know Jennifer, you with the tech committee had been working on live streaming options, but it'll be a little bit before we can get that set up. So I know that Paul was going to touch base with Springford to see what they will do, if there's any kind of like simple fix that we can do for now, and then work on a long-term solution with the tech committee. But we could potentially have the board interviews be our test.
Well, what we really need to do is be clear about what we are defining as live streaming. There is a technology defined as live streaming, which is not Zoom. So if people like what we're doing now with Zoom and the ability to do raise hand, that's not live streaming. So which technology are you talking about?
So I'm talking about incorporating Zoom for now until we figure out the live streaming aspect, but that's another topic that we have to talk about is the public comment. Because I don't think you're able to do that with live streaming.
Right, and that's the thing is, if we're talking about live streaming as a way for people to comment live, that's a mismatch. That's two different things. So we do need to, as a board, get on the same page as to what exactly are we looking to provide people? Is it just being able to see us in the moment? Or is it the ability to raise hand and ask questions that we want to give people?
It's a good question. I think where I'm seeking public input, and this can come through email, would be great, is Zoom now and the capabilities that we have to reach people with two-way communication, right? With raised hands and questions. Is that now a have to have for public meetings versus a nice to have? Because if we can't figure out the technology in time for the 13th, 14th, or 20th, do we stay with this format exactly as we're using right now? Or do we try to get together as a in-person public meeting, give it a shot, but if the technology fails, we've got a big problem with the public who really wanted to join via Zoom. I don't know, how reliable is it? Those are all questions I have. And I think the public would say that the Zoom meetings are important because of the broad exposure it gives people. But I don't know, maybe people are saying, no, you need to get back together in person where we can come and attend the meeting. I'm okay either way. I just don't know what the preference is.
Well, couldn't we kind of do both in that with a Zoom meeting, but instead of us all being in our little cubby holes, we're all in the same room?
Right.
That's
So,
about testing out.
yeah.
I just have never been in a Zoom meeting with 9 people who were sitting across the table from me without getting echoes and screeches and
So Springford was able to do, it was basically the camera was on all 9 of the board members. They were all spaced out. And then it just showed.
And everybody could hear really well?
So they had I think they had something hooked up with their microphones.
Okay.
We're talking about it.
Springford has a whole TV studio set up, and there are multiple cameras in their boardroom that they got back to me. They just were able to connect with their existing setup and just do one Zoom account through their TV studio, and so they have all the technology set up in their boardroom with multiple cameras, and a TV crew there. Really, if you watch their meeting, they change cameras, they do this, that. We don't have any of that in our LGI at the high school. So that's what Mr. Deal is saying is correct. You can't have 9 people in the same room on a Zoom without echoes and feedback. That's why there's only one. So we're looking into all those things right now. And I'll be going over to Springford soon.
Did you ask if Springford had that room tied up on Monday nights?
We could go over there.
I mean, they're not that far. I mean, so I'm in no rush to move off of Zoom unless there's a real reason to move back into live meetings, especially this summer when I think, we have 100 participants as I look down the bottom of the screen right now. Last week, obviously we had 600 and some for different reasons, but the ability for folks to participate from wherever they are and to see this, I'd really hate to see that disappear. So until we have a solution that allows us to sort of, whatever we call that, stream it or allow that public to watch and participate the way we're doing, I kind of like what I'm seeing. I mean, I like the live meetings too, and the interaction's a lot easier and you can see people and look them in the eye. And that's good, but I'm not in a rush to jump back in if we don't have the technology figured out yet. So I'd like to see us get that done.
I would like the technology to be correct as well, but from my perspective, I would love to not be having this meeting in my dining room anymore, just because for me, it's kind of stressful with my family. I know we all have different family responsibilities and things, but I have a very noisy family.
That's why I'm here at the middle school.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I guess I could go find another location in some other room in the middle school, or I don't know, but I feel like, I'd love for the community to be able to participate, but I would really love to not have this to be a burden on my people over here, if possible.
I would like to see our interviews for a new board member to be, at least for the board members and the applicants, to be face-to-face or in person with social distancing, and then maybe have it, if it can be done, streamed for the non-participants in some manner. But I think that's something, to me anyway, that's very important. You get a very different impression of people when you are in person. You get to judge inflections, etc. So I would like to see somehow, when we go forward for these interviews for the new committee or the new board member, that we are able to do that in person.
Yeah,
we only have a few days to figure that out.
Pardon? I
We
know.
only have a few days to figure it out. The clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking. Yes, the clock
Yeah,
is ticking.
But to your point, Melissa, it's okay to have these Zoom meetings about, certain topics, but to choose another board member, I want to kind of be there and see how he or she reacts and talks and
Body language. Tells you a lot.
body language.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I think we need to work
If I could play devil's advocate, so I've done this for a living for many years, and video interviewing is something that happens every day around the world very effectively. And it might even be more effective in this time, since I don't know about you guys, but I'll be wearing a mask if I come and meet in person, and you can't see my inflections when I have my face covered. So it's something to consider. I will be more than happy to go in person. I do prefer to do interviews in person. I'm not saying I don't prefer to do them. I absolutely 100% prefer to do interviews in person. But it's something to consider. And I would also, we do have to have the technology figured out though, because if we're going to do it in person, we do have to allow the public to be a part of and witness those interviews.
Yeah, we do have to do that if we deliberate. If we just allow their presentation, we don't have to have it in public, but we could, what's the term? My goodness. We could video it so that people could tune into it before we would vote, maybe, something like that.
Well, I think I'd rather do it via video, and I don't think I could take a 3-hour meeting in a mask personally.
How about go to school all day like that?
All right, so I guess what I'm thinking,
you don't want to.
says, let's work on live streaming capabilities, but continue Zoom. Is that the
For regular meetings, yeah.
thought?
Well, I think it's important when we say live streaming. I think Jennifer brought up a good point.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the key point
Yeah,
of Zoom
what do we
is the
mean?
two-way communication.
Yeah,
So
what
we've
do
got to figure out how to use Zoom or some other platform that allows for two-way communication if we meet in person as a board.
So the live streaming technology that you have, right? That'll be helpful in getting these meetings up and running, but then maybe we can use that for the different platforms. If there's a different platform than Zoom that we want to use.
Yeah, I'm not a technology guy, so I'm not quite sure what's even possible. But I think if you just said from a big public perspective, what it is that they would want, I think it's the flexibility to participate as we've been doing, albeit, who knows, hopefully in a better future format. I don't know.
Well, if we were physically in one place, I guess the non-technical question would be, would we as board members be open to like just hearing, you know, like a person's voice in a godlike way in the room? Or would we be more interested in having a mediator who reads written comments, or, you know, somebody who listens to the voice and translates? It just, I guess we have to understand, you know, is somebody reading written comments on a screen, or are we hearing the actual participant's voice if we were all in a room?
I sure would like to hear the voice. I think it's very difficult to interpret.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've gotten feedback too that sometimes the tone is not reflected appropriately when it's read. So that's something to watch for.
I'm with live comments back and forth. I don't like the reading. I think we just need to fix this in some way to make it, whether there's a flat screen TV with all the Zoom and we're just one part of the, you know, the 9 of us are a single Zoom and the rest of the folks are up on the screen. I don't know what the options are, but you know, I think it's important we figure something out. And by we, I mean Paul.
We do
Pressure,
have,
Paul. No pressure.
We do have the East Coventry cafeteria large screen.
Right, because you know, imagine like we had a big Zoom screen, and you know, we could see everybody. They could talk. We would be one unit if we can do it. I don't know. So I would say, again, I prefer to have the back and forth in some fashion, but I'll defer whatever. And to Kathy's point, to meet live, that's the better thing to do for the 9 of us and especially when an interview, I'm not opposed. I just, you know, my preference is I think the public interaction and the public access is an important piece that we need to continue to have.
I think we could talk about it all night. So I think Paul understands what he needs to come to us with as a recommendation.
Yep.
Melissa, though, had a suggestion that was a little bit different that we don't need to decide right now. I don't think that if we want to consider it for the interviews, and that was do it in person and record.
Yeah.
And we didn't on that. So just to put that out there.
I'm concerned about that. I would rather everything be public. I'd almost rather do it on Zoom if everybody can watch at the same time. But
I would prefer to. Just want to make sure it didn't get lost.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, again, we're probably going to disagree on that, but
I think there has to be an option to view it live. So I don't know that you could video and show it later.
Right.
It would have to be live.
Well, I think to Melissa's point, it would have to be 2 sessions if we did it that way. The first session would just be presentations with the board members not doing any deliberation. And then the live part would be where we do our deliberation.
And we might not.
Where we ask questions, etc.
So,
yeah.
Right. That might just drag our timeline out too much if we have to break it into 2 sessions.
I think it's a very dangerous line between deliberations and interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I just mean let them present, because that is what we've done in the past. We've let the applicants present, and then we would question. We could let them present and then reconvene to ask questions. And that would be the deliberation part. And that should be with the public.
We've sort of moved on to item 7, apparently.
We haven't we?
Oh,
Yeah.
look at us.
Yeah,
Wow.
they just kind of morphed into
That's because I talked too long, Kathy. You're just skipping over me. I know it.
We're skipping over Kathy too.
I was going to say, I haven't been there yet.
All right. So for now, we're going to continue with Zoom. We're going to figure out the live streaming option, what that means for public comment, because we want public comment to continue. All right, moving on to, sorry guys, I got to keep moving on because it's getting late. Curriculum. Sorry, Kathy.
Okay, it's okay. We're gonna be much quicker, right?
It will be Kathy, Paul, Melissa, and John Melizak.
Okay, so we just have 2 items here. The first one is the flexible instructional day application. This is 5.01 we're on here. And so if just we're recalling this topic, we did not pursue this in the past for use for snow days. And that was because, you know, there was a difficulty of delivering the services to students and who need them, and no one else in the county was doing this. But now we are looking at this again because we have different situations now, pandemic closure, and maybe possibly individual buildings needing to close and things like that. So we can look at this again. It's a very short application. And I guess we need to do 2 things today. We would acknowledge the receipt of the application, and then we would look and see if we want to move this to the full board. So if Dr. Soter wants to elaborate on the application and what we need to do.
Sure, thank you. So just as you had suggested, we have the option of being able to include flexible instructional days in our health and safety plan for the coming school year. So just to remind everybody, these were also known as cyber snow days. So these are the options that school districts have for having students work remotely when there needs to be a school closure. And just as Mrs. DiMarino suggested, we as a county did not apply for the flexible instructional days, but the Department of Education is encouraging school districts to do this moving forward for the new school year, knowing that there might be times when schools might need to be closed for at the local level. And this could give us a bit more flexibility in the event, especially if we need 1 or 2 or not the entire school district closed. This is a way of keeping our attendance potentially even for our buildings, as well as if we would make the choice to have this be for a cyber snow day. The application is very basic, and actually the bulk of the application we have taken care of so far, which is uploading sample lesson plans. We've had teachers and supervisors create those. That is also part of the application. And so really what we need is, we ultimately would need the board's permission to apply. And so what we are seeking at this time is for the curriculum committee to move this on as an item for us to have the full board consider at the July board meeting, so that we can make the application to the Department of Education in August. The application is, as I said, is very basic. It has just a few questions that have been answered, and then the upload of 6 documents. But we just are seeking the committee to move this on, because ultimately we need the board's permission to actually make application to the Department of Ed.
Kathy, you just need us to make a motion to get this to move up. So I'll make a motion.
Second.
Move it.
Perfect. Wow. Okay, great. Okay, so that will move on. Great. Moving on. 5.02 is we are going to have an online learning or resources update. And this is in response to the fact that we may have different circumstances coming up in the fall needed for students who may need to access their education virtually, basically exclusively that way, or maybe in and out if there's closures, or maybe in and out if students have personal circumstances. So Dr. Soter's team has developed some criteria for what are the best resources that they have been looking at and what they look like. And so certain products have kind of risen to the top as far as meeting all their criteria and meeting curricular objectives, compatible with Canvas and Google Classroom and things like that. So if she wants to give us just a brief update on what you found and what things are looking like the best choices for us.
Great. As you suggested, and in your earlier conversations, you talked about all of those different groups of students and really trying to make plans for students who might choose to be out of school exclusively, working online, students who would be in our classrooms with our teachers, as well as students who may need to be home for short bits of time because of needing to isolate or quarantine. And so those are all the groups of students who we are looking at. I will be turning this over to Dr. Monahan, but very, very quickly, the curriculum supervisors, the principals and the assistant principals, the academic coaches and tech coaches have been truly working on this. This has been a labor since April. We have been looking at products since the beginning of April for things that we think would be best for our students to be using in the new year. Upwards of 26 different software systems and applications that we have taken a look at. And our considerations for this, for moving forward, were there are some things that we are really looking for all of the students to be able to use, a single access point for students and parents so they are not all over the place going to multiple sites in order to access their learning materials. Things that are well aligned to our current curriculum and meet the Pennsylvania state standards. As you can imagine, vendors for these kinds of online products are national and international, and they don't necessarily meet the Pennsylvania state standards. We are looking at products that are customizable, things that can be flexible and can be changed over time so that our teachers have the opportunity to make things that are appropriate for individual students or groups of students. We're looking at products that have very specific assessment features that can give us benchmarking as well as end of unit or end of course tests so that our students can have appropriate assessments. We're looking for opportunities for differentiation. We know that in our classrooms, we are needing to meet the needs of students who are receiving learning support as well as gifted support. And so we want products that offer that same level of differentiation. And finally, reporting features that make the students' progress known to the school district, to teachers, to parents, and to students. And so all of those have been very important considerations in looking at the different vendors. And what we did as a process was our supervisors really spent the bulk of their time taking a look at these, really then bringing what they believed to be the best of the best to our teacher groups, setting up demonstrations with them, and then getting feedback from those groups. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Monahan. He can tell you a little bit more about that process and where we are right now.
Thank you, Dr. Soder. So can you hear me?
Yep.
So, you know, one of the things I do want to take a moment to thank our academic coaches, our department chairs, teacher leaders, and our principals, because in April, while the curriculum department was focused on, you know, looking and previewing to bring the best of the best to the group, when the school year ended on the 5th of June, we actually started the work for prepping for, you know, teaching in the unknown. Right? We don't know what it's going to look like because as we watch the news, things change on a daily basis. So we know that when we're looking at a product, we're looking at platforms, we're considering all those things Dr. Soder spoke about. These teachers, administrators who were on vacation gave up a lot of time from June 15th till today, spending hours really digging into the different platforms, different platforms to really fine tune and think about what's going to be best for our students and their families. Should we be in and out, or should parents opt to be 100% online? So that being said, one of the first decisions that we came upon was a single point of entry. So from grades kindergarten through 8th grade, we are selecting Google Classroom as our platform. And that, you know, there's no Seesaw for some kids and Google for some kids, and there's no mixing that anymore. So the principals felt very comfortable with using that as our place where everybody goes to start. We don't have all the specific software picked out for each curriculum area, because what we found is all of the softwares, either they worked for ELA or they worked for math, or they worked for math and science or ELA and science. So none of them had a platform that worked for all subject areas. So that was somewhat troublesome. So we actually think that using Google Classroom, we will be able to provide content through Google Classroom with supplemental assessments with, I'll give an example of a tool like IXL, which is an online assessment where students can take an assessment and it's adaptive and gives them a placement for what they should be working on. So we can work together with that. The high school and middle school felt extremely comfortable with that. And elementary, we had in mind a different product until we learned very late that the product doesn't work with iPads. So they're the things that we need to think about too, because we know our students are working on phones, iPads, tablets, Chromebooks, you can name the device. And so we need to make sure whatever platform we use is going to work with what the students have in front of them. So, but we do feel confident that we will be able to deliver content through Google Classroom with some supplemental resources to provide the assessment, as Dr. Soter mentioned, when we look at the criteria for what we need. And in meeting with our academic coaches and principals at the elementary level, they too feel that we can absolutely accomplish that. For our 100% online students, because at the high school, our students all have Chromebooks, as well as the middle school, they will. We feel more confident with the software that we are looking at for that, because it works with Chromebooks. At the elementary level, we know that not all of our students have Chromebooks. And so we're still, that one we still need to kind of take a second look at. But again, we've only really started looking at this starting, after the last student day, and last teacher day in June, because our focus for our teachers was getting to the end of the year successfully. So we continue to look at that. And really the feedback and that criteria for selecting the software is always in front of us. That, that one-stop shop, the assessment, the differentiation, all those things Dr. Soter mentioned are really important for whatever we look at.
I have a question for you. If we have students that are going to be completely online in the fall because they're choosing to do so, will we have an option for TCHS students? What will the plan be for them?
We will need to work with all of our specialized programs for what they want to do for their students. So right now, our TCHS students, for the most part, spend half of their day in our high school and half of their day at the technical high school. So we will be working with all of those partners on what they want to do for their in-class as well as remote students. I would imagine that most of the lab courses, the students are going to want to be in their labs.
Okay. And then also, when do you project that you'll have everything basically settled for full-time online students as far as all the things you're looking at? Do you have like a target date?
We're really wanting to finish this up as quickly as we can. That's going to be a little bit easier for our K-8. As far as online for the high school, some of that planning is going to be somewhat dependent on the number of students who make that choice, because it will dictate how we need to schedule those classes. But we are really hoping to finalize the actual products really by the end of this week, if at all possible. We had a feedback session today. And so we're really just wanting to get the last of that we can compiled from our teacher leaders, and hoping to have something really ready to go beginning of next week.
Okay, great. Does anyone on the committee have questions?
No, Kathy, that was just on the timeline was the most important. Is there going to be staff training that's going to be required? And I just, it gets back to that timeline of concern. Are we going to have time to have staff be trained, get going? And then how many staff, if we're going to do kind of that full-time online, how are we designating and pulling staff? What's your staffing plan?
Sure. So we have actually really earmarked time during the in-service days prior to the start of the school year already for training. Even though we didn't necessarily know what it would be, we had set aside some time for that. We also have put in place some days that would be prior to that for two purposes. Teachers who want something more, who want some extra training time. We were actually looking at the week that we normally have induction for that, as well as if we choose a product and we need to have a side-by-side with our current curriculum, as far as, okay, if you were working, just for an example, in the month of September, here is sort of what you would be covering in a language arts class at the elementary level. If the students were going to be out for X amount of time, this is what you would be using in the online resource in order for the students to access that same material. So sort of that side by side between resources that we use in the classroom, resources that we would be using online. We're taking a look at having groups of teachers come in and work with the curriculum supervisors on that work in late July as well as in August. So that's really, those two things are in play for us in just a bit later in the summer.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have other questions? How about from other board members that aren't on the committee? Does anyone want to ask a question?
I'm good.
Okay. Do we want to, if there's any raised hands about these two topics, flexible instructional days or online learning, we could answer them quickly if there are any.
There are two hands up. I'll start with Mr. Clifford DeFore. Mr. DeFore, you are unmuted.
Thank you. I just had a quick question about the type of technology we're going to use for instructions online. Can we look at a hosted application? The reason why I say look at a hosted application is because if you use something like Google Classroom, you're going to have platform problems. I think you mentioned that. And you're going to continue to have platform problems between Google and iPads and iPhones and things like that. They don't play well together. So hosted application, you have more control and it can go across multiple platforms. And that's the only comment I had, is that it may be worth it to look at a hosted platform that we can control. And that way we don't have to worry about what type of platform or what type of technology the students are using. Just think of it like a Skyward, but for this purpose. That's all I had.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to address that at all, or should we? That also sounds like it's for Paul as well.
Actually, I've been working with Paul and Frank on this and looking at those applications that will work across all those devices. So that is something that while not part of the criteria that Kathy talked about early, that has come up, and we are actually looking at that type of content that it won't be device specific.
Okay. So do we have another question, Paul?
Yes, Miss Andrea Mandeville.
Hi, Andrea Mandeville, East Vincent. Just wanting to clarify, when you're talking about the high school and schedules, did I hear, just wondered if I'm hearing it correctly, that the high school schedules that our kids have gotten, we had to have, I think, completed by whatever, revised by June 15th. Will the kids have totally different schedules in the fall?
No, I wouldn't expect that the students would have totally different schedules in the fall. This would be really more for students who choose to have something that's completely online. You might have those classes in a different order, but I wouldn't expect the students to have a different schedule.
And just a quick follow-up, is the possibility of partially online, partially in school an option, or even on the radar? And that's it.
So currently, our high school students actually take advantage of that. We have students who have that in their coursework right now. So we would be continuing with that. That's always been an option for our children.
Okay.
We do have 2 more hands up if you want to.
Okay. Let's do 2 more.
Okay. Courtney Osmond. You are unmuted.
Thank you very much. This is Hisham Osman. It's one topic around the Google Classroom and other applications, especially for the elementary students. You mentioned before that not all platforms work for all classes, whether it be math, sciences, and whatnot. One of the challenges as parents that we have is managing all the different logins. So even though Google Classroom is still the central platform, all the additional applications, it does make it completely challenging and frustrating for both the parents and children. And I know we're trying to give our kids the best education, but when it's a daily battle every morning, which login and which ID and which password to be able to get to the assignment, it was a frustration. And I think if it's something we can look at into the fall, that at least we have a single sign-on, that it's one ID and password for all of the applications for the parents and students, would make it much easier. And in addition, something around scheduling, like a Google Calendar for all the parents to know the assignments that their children need to do. In the elementary school, they sent the homework books to be signed off. On the online classes, that didn't exist. So we didn't know what assignments were being missed until we got an email saying that, you know, your child missed something. So not having that day-to-day interaction with our teachers of what assignments and what learnings need to happen, I think we need to find a digital solution for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Do we have any response to that from Dr. Soder?
Okay. We've had continuous conversations with the administrative team and our teacher leaders about having some different expectations going into the fall. And those are excellent examples of some of the frustrations on both sides of this. So yes, I do believe that any of our online learning environment next year would look different for many of the things that Mr. Osmond was discussing.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Paul?
Next one is Paul O'Sullivan. You are unmuted. Mr. O'Sullivan?
He appears to be muted on my screen. There he goes. There he is.
Mr. O'Sullivan? I don't think he's there.
Okay, all right. Is that it for our raised hands?
It is.
Okay, so that concludes curriculum instruction. So I guess I'm turning it over to Paul Friel.
All right, Finance Committee. So it's John, Melissa, Leslie, and myself, and Ms. Crumrine, of course. So the first order of business on the Finance Committee is approval of the Finance Committee meeting minutes. If anybody, any questions on the minutes? If not, I'd like to get a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion carries, and we have approved the minutes. The second part of the meeting really is we're beginning, and to the public, really beginning the budget process right now. We mentioned a little bit about this in the last meeting we had, and made a statement about, you know, we're starting from a baseline of 0. With that, we had some questions that came up in the public, and really in our agenda items tonight, we have budget considerations that are really things that were on the original, maybe proposed budget back in January, and were taken off. And I think there were some misconceptions in the public based on some questions that came into the board or social media posts. So we just want to have an opportunity to quickly kind of hit on them, and if anybody wants to jump in on them. But there was, you know, personnel resource changes where they said, oh, we cut certain staff positions. We didn't cut any staff positions. We postponed proposed new positions and some of them from the budget that was proposed, but we did not cut things out in terms of, we did not, like other school districts,
Yes.
you know, laid off folks or furloughed folks. We did not do that. We actually added, net added some positions in our budget. So I just want to clarify that piece of it. The actual, if you want to see, it's located in the budget. You can see it's a percentage of a person. It's really just hours. So I don't know if anybody wanted to comment on that, but that information Ms. Carmine has, and it's posted, you know, for the public view under that. There was two other big kind of, you know, things that we took on, and an issue that came up regarding pay to play that we want to have some discussion on. So I'll hit the easier one first, which is the proposed senior tax credit and rebate program, which we had proposed, and we had it as part of the budget originally, is a rebate program that matched and mirrored a program that was issued by the state of Pennsylvania. And a bunch of other school districts do this as well. And we postponed voting on this and considering it because of COVID-19 and where we were in a budget, and said, let's take a further look at this once we had a better view into what revenue looked like. I think the board and the finance committee in general had talked. Ms. Carmine said, you know, by August, should have a better idea of earned income tax for the year, where we are versus where we thought we were. So it's something I would propose, if members want to chime in on this, is let's put it back on the agenda for consideration September, after Ms. Carmine has a better idea of what the revenue looks like, if that's something we would want to move forward. But I don't know that we're in any better position today to have any more insights in it. I don't know if any of the committee wants to talk about that.
Well, I agree with you. I think we need to wait. And if it looks feasible, to put it back on the agenda. But I think we need to wait to find out what our collectibles might be looking like.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. So Jackie, you know, I think that's the same course. And, you know, part of this is just to reiterate this to the public, that we're postponing consideration of this just so we have, you know, better insight into the actual collection of taxes and where we're at. And then we'll put it back, maybe put it on tentatively for September, and then we'll just reconsider then. Then there was some questions that came up, and I know this came back to the board in 2017 on pay to play. They did an analysis, and the board elected to not move forward with any of the pay to play. And so there's a discussion guide that was presented, and it had, you know, should we consider a parent survey? What would a fee structure look like? Should it be just athletics? Should it be all activities? Should it be different different dollar amounts for elementary, middle school, high school, or be the same uniform? Should it be based on activity type or cost of activity, meaning like band or football that are expensive? Would they be the same rate as the cross country or some after school that had no real cost, or a lower cost? So those are the considerations that you see. I think Jackie laid out what was considered in the past. There's also an equity issue of, you know, students who can afford or parents who can afford this. And it's just another opportunity or a potential opportunity for us to have a kid who's not, you know, even though we would probably have I'm sure, a way of not charging some kids. It's just another label, you know, that, you know, kids know these things. That's a concern that was brought up. And then Jackie and team would have to administer this stuff. So do we have, you know, the more complicated we make it, the harder it is to administer. The more uniform we make it, the more issues we have with just the equity issue. What do we need for data to make an informed decision about this? So what do we need from the finance committee's view to actually consider this? So what are the parameters we want to do that? So for that, I just wanted to quickly go through that and open it up for discussion with the committee.
Yeah, Paul, I'll start in that I believe that our district is somewhat of an outlier. in not having a policy like this. I know the administration provided us some data in Chester County, but I would suggest we take a look at surrounding districts, because I think we have more in common with Springford and PV than we do with, somewhere in southern Chester County. But, even talking to students far outside of our area, this summer, it's been kind of assumed that, well, yeah, we have one. And I asked about the equity issue, because that equity issue can play both ways, right? So in one way, I think we rightfully don't want to impose a fee on families that, or would have a financial hardship in affording it. And the other hand, you could argue, well, if you do that, then you create the equity issue. I don't think you get anywhere. And the response from the kids that I talked to was that, oh, it's administered electronically. It's confidential. The coaches don't even know, who participates in the program, who has waivers, who doesn't. And I am really, really interested in a simple model. So talking about which sports cost more than other sports, and I think you get into a level of complexity that I assume Ms. Crumrine would be the one administering this thing, and I don't want to create an apparatus, but I am in favor. I do think your point about, do we need more data? I've seen some estimated data. I don't know if that's enough for us to make an informed decision, but at least my viewpoint at this point is it seems like we're an outlier. If we want to be honest about keeping tax rates lower than the Act 1 index, and even starting from a zero balance and seeing how we can try to stick to that, Paul, you know as well as I do, money's pretty impartial, right? There's two ways to do it. You got to raise revenue or you got to cut costs. And as we look at, some of the options available, I think this is a revenue option that we need to seriously consider.
I know some schools, John, have just athletics and some do it on both. Do you have an opinion on, is it athletics only or all activities in general?
I guess my opinion would be, if we form a club, do we have to pay an advisor to oversee the club?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
And
we do.
is there any limitation in any way other than we don't have enough kids or we don't have an advisor, where we would say, is this going to be a sustainable club? I don't know. I think that, again, the dollar amounts that we're talking about are, because I think kids in athletics also participate in activities across the board. And I wouldn't recommend a system where we're charging incremental amounts as we look at how many activities somebody participates in, or so on and so forth. So I think, if we decide to do something with this, I think we look at simplicity of administration. I think we look at equity. I think we look at confidentiality. And I think we look at what neighboring districts and districts like us are doing. And to your point, if we need more data, more detailed data, whether we need to look to our athletic director and or our activities director to provide rosters that we could get more specific. I don't know where that data comes from, but if we think we need more, I think we need to look at it. But I think we need to make a decision one way or the other, up or down, probably by the time the school year starts.
I agree. I think it's time that we do this. We are the outlier. And I think it's come to the point where we can no longer be the outlier and try to stop the escalation on our residents and their tax base. The only real thing besides getting some more information, I would prefer the simplistic format. I would prefer that it covers both athletics and activities. But my one question would be, would we do this by semester or by year? That's just another thought process, but I'm in full agreement that it's time that we start looking at this seriously.
I think we should look at it, but I think we should give the public an opportunity to speak about it, because I've heard varying opinions on it, and I'm in the camp of doing what the public wants to do. So I think it could be a revenue, but I also think that it's not going to add a significant amount either. So I think we take a look at it more, and I think we need to answer those questions of what do we want to charge. I'm kind of in the camp of a flat fee for the year. make it simple, because think of who's going to have to manage all of this. And then you
Yeah.
put a cap on, someone's going to have to look at that, and they're going to have to look at multiple people in the family. I think making it as simple for administration to do as possible. And that would be for athletics and activities, but I think we're going to need to find a way to get the public to give input on it too.
So the consensus, I think, if I'm reiterating everybody, is like a simple flat fee, all inclusive for everybody who participates in an activity, regardless of whether it's an academic club or sport. And then, is everybody okay? I know, Melissa, you said semester, but like an annual flat fee to kind of keep it.
I'm fine with
Isn't
that
it
too.
an analysis tool? And this is not me saying I'm for or against this. I'm just trying to, get the analysis consensus here. And then I think there's two other pieces of data we need. Would be, to John's point, let's look at what other school districts are doing. I'm all for plagiarizing and not, reinventing the wheel here. And then but I do think it's really important that we get public input on this. Can we,
Sure we will.
despite all my previous comments about our surveys, is there a way to get a feedback from parents and public, not just parents, but everybody on this, so we could put this out there of what's the feeling on an activities fee. And then obviously the only distinction I would say is if it's a different fee for elementary school versus middle school versus high school. There's probably some things there. And the one thing I think, John, you kind of said, but it kind of struck a chord with me is, do we have any parameters for clubs that have been created where we have staff, but if we only have 2 kids in it, like at what point do we say this doesn't make sense, right? I mean, we always want to give kids the opportunity to do this. When do we go back and look at our investments in these after school activities and say, this club's not sustainable, it's not working, or it had its time and it's no longer there.
I'm happy to comment on that if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please do.
We've done that. Yes, we do
Okay.
that. Not all of our advisors are paid. So there are, especially at the secondary level, there's some criteria where the students have, if they have an interest, they need to find a person who will work with them as an advisor. And then there are specific flex units in the collective bargaining agreement, because that is what governs the paid advisors. So sometimes if a club has been operating for a few years, then they will move into the flex category. After they're still popular and still viable, then they move into a permanent category, because it's kind of a stepped process. Just to let you know about that.
So there's activities that have no cost?
There are some clubs that have no cost. Correct. There absolutely are, because they may be just a club where, I don't know one off the top of my head, but the advisor and the students may debate some issues or talk about some issues of concern after school, and it may not have a cost, or they may do their own fundraising for it. So we would want to
maybe get a list of, just kind of give us an outline of clubs and just a general cost, and then also some of the analysis with the other school districts of who does what, what the fee structure looks like on a simple fee structure.
And Paul, just so we know, that was already furnished in one of the board lines following one of the last committee meetings. But the reason I bring it up is I think the format it was presented in was actually really helpful. It gave you an overview of the different models. And I think we could kind of fill in that chart with some of the more neighboring districts just to see, who has one. If so, what's it look like? I thought it was presented very well.
There is an attachment in your executive content that says countywide survey for athletics and activity fees, if that's the one that you're referring to.
I think it is.
It's there.
What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you just want to go outside the circle of Chester County. You really
Correct.
want to
Yeah.
We don't have to go crazy on it, but yeah, let's look around our area.
Okay.
All right, so let's look around our area and let's also get some parent feedback on this, and then let's put it back on the agenda, I guess. And then, once you complete that, you'll circulate it to the committee. And then
Sure, I'll probably reach out to you about the survey, what we're going to be doing with that. So before we send it out. So
And Jackie, the other question I would have is if we did move forward with a recommendation here, do we have the system in place to electronically request payment, collect payment confidentially.
And I would say that we would require it electronically because we are moving into that mode where we just can't have all these pieces of paper.
Absolutely.
So we would require the use of school pay, which is the system that we're using now. And everything is moving to school pay starting next year. There were some still little hanging chats that weren't, but everything will be required to be on school pay.
That's the system actually that I heard referenced from kids even from outside our area. So,
Right. Right, because we can roster on there. There's a lot of things we can do with that system.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is there any other questions on those 4 topics before we move on? All right. Then the only other thing, there was a couple questions that came up at the last board meeting. One of them had to do with the sale of real estate, and I think there was some misconception on what that was.
Yeah.
I know we might have answered that, but Melissa, would you mind just speaking to that to the public on what that is and maybe clear that up a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. There weren't actually any comments made at the meeting, but request of information came in after the meeting. I received some just from neighbors, some questioning, and I think the board received some email also concerning the sale. So I would just, as we are discussing the financial issues, I would like to address the district land sale that we did approve February 2020 board business meeting. To bring clarity to the sale, the property sold was a parcel of land known as the Pennhurst property, 22.4 acres. The district had leased Edis farmland, and following completion of the 2 elementary school facility upgrades, deemed it unnecessary land holdings. Following a 2-year dialogue and legislative process, the sale resolution was passed. Pennsylvania American Water Utility Company plans to build a new water treatment facility on the property, eventually replacing the older Royersford plant located nearby. While it's not located directly along the Schuylkill River, as the current building is, the land is situated close to the current intake so that water can continue to be drawn from the river. July 13th, 2020 is a scheduled hearing. When finalized, the $1.2 million of proceeds will go directly into the capital fund budget for projects such as maintenance, repairs, and future planned capital projects. As it turns out, the windfall will provide financial relief for the 2021-2022 budget process. It is not a large parcel of land that is going to be developed upon and is not going to harm neighboring water. Jackie, would you like to add anything additional?
I just, the only thing that I would add, and I think you touched on it briefly, is that it is not going to impact wells, individual home-owned wells or water sources, because the PA Water will be drawing from the Schuylkill River, so it will not impact local wells. And it's a replacement plant.
Yes, it's a replacement,
Yeah,
non-additional.
existing plant's almost adjacent. So this is just an ability for them to add the capacity and upgrade something and actually move it further away from the river. So it's a positive environmental impact, and it doesn't, it's not a net addition of a plant. It's a replacement of an aging plant. So I think it's a good community use of this land, and it's a positive budget impact. It's going to be accretive to us immediately in this next year, or as soon as this gets.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure, because I know we had a lot of, thank you, Melissa, because we did have a lot of questions that came up regarding that.
We did indeed.
And the last one I just want to reiterate, and then if anybody on the finance committee has anything else, is, we talked about the budget in Act 1, and I think, part of the statement we kind of talked about was, in the past, we recognize it provides that temptation to use that as a budgeting target. Our budget target, just so everybody's clear on this, is 0, right? We're going to start there. We realize, that might not be realistic depending on how contracts, we have contractual obligations as, with REA and other folks who work for us, but we're going to start at 0 as our basis. And Ms. Crumrine is going to be budgeting at that point. And we're going to say, what does the district look like here? And then we're going to take that as our jumping off point, with the full intention of not using Act 1 and not pushing, trying to push to that. COVID-19 is the unknown here. We do not know what the economic impact is. We know it, we pulled $3.5 million out of our proposed budget in the last year and still had a budget deficit. So, we're going to be aggressive looking for, and that's why we structured the refinancing of our debt. That's why we're going to use the land sale here to do what we can do. As we have attrition and we have retirements, we're going to look at that to relook at our workforce planning. Any other budget levers that we have available that are smart, that do not impact, the kids and what it is we're trying to deliver a mission. We're going to weigh and balance those financial decisions with what the mission of Owen J. Roberts is. So, that's really the charge of the Finance Committee. So if anybody else wants to kind of add on, I just wanted to make sure folks knew that. And Jackie, when are we going to, we're starting right now in the budgeting process, but we're pretty clear where we're headed, right?
Right. And just so that you know, and I know we're not using the Act 1 index as a target, but that is our cap, and that will be out probably in September. We usually start our budgeting process in August, September, October, so that we have a good feel by November what our preliminary budget is. And I know it's very early, but we have some January deadlines.
Yeah, I would just like to say that we do have to follow PDE's Act 1 laws and calendar guidelines and timeline. And if we fail to do that, we lose our tax opportunities. We close our doors. So we do have to follow these laws, and we do have to follow the PDE law and all the mandates, contractual responsibilities that go with it. It's a very tricky business, and I've always appreciated the intensity that you and administration follows doing that, but we are going to take a different approach this time. And I think we're all concurrent on the fact that we need to do that to stop the escalation on our residents. So I think we're all in the same thought process going forward.
No further comment.
All right. Thank you. If there's any public comment, please you can ask us. Otherwise, that's all I had on the agenda for the Finance Committee tonight.
There's no hands raised.
Awesome. We wore them out, Paul. That's great.
We did. We wore everybody out.
And thank you very much, everybody on the Finance Committee. You guys have all been, working really hard at this. Thank you, Jackie. I think it's a long, detailed process, and I know you've really done a good job of putting us in a better position than a lot of other school districts around us. So that's good. I think ONJ is well positioned to make some changes, but also deliver on the service. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So we got to have everyone come back. You all come back.
Those of you who fell asleep, right?
All right. So item 7 is the school board vacancy. Sorry, Lydia. I think I'm getting your feedback again.
I'll do. I know.
There you go.
Yay. Thank you. Sorry.
So we need to establish the process and the date. So Dr. Lloyd and Mr. Deal and I discussed holding the 13th and the 14th at 7 p.m. Holding the 14th, this is for July, for as needed. We need to discuss how the interviews will be held. Will we allow the candidate to speak for a few minutes and answer a set number of questions? Should we set a time limit of, say, 10 minutes per candidate? How do we want to move forward once we have interviewed everyone? Do we want to roll call vote, or do we want to select top 2 or top 3 choices to narrow down? So lots of questions. Let's start with the beginning, July 13th and 14th. Are we comfortable?
Sounds good.
In the evening, or?
It would be, I think 7 o'clock is what we had discussed.
7.
So we're holding those 2
Correct.
dates. We'll advertise for July 13th and 14th at 7 p.m. Then the thought is that we'll see how the 13th starts to shake out, whether or not we'll need the 14th.
Okay.
And then, Mrs. Prophet, is it my understanding that they will be conducted via Zoom?
Yes, I think that's what we had all agreed to do. Correct?
I think we should, I mean, because we have to state it now, right? We don't have any other time to get back together. I think we should do it by Zoom, and if we can find a way to meet together to do it and still Zoom,
Right.
we should do that. But I think it's Zoom at a minimum so that everybody can see what's going on.
So we've got,
hopefully in public.
we've got how many weeks until then?
Not many.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Two
Then just
weeks.
keep in mind, we have to have this filled by the 15th.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I think the fallback of doing Zoom at a minimum, right, where we would not necessarily be together, is what you have to move. Oh, well, in my mind,
That gives Paul 2 weeks to figure a possible solution out.
which I'm not sure is going to happen, but at least we would do it by Zoom.
Yeah.
Right, and we really need to advertise the meeting, because if it's going to be a public meeting where you're going to ask interview questions,
Mm-hmm.
we really would need to advertise, you know, the meeting by the 9th or 10th, just so everybody's clear.
How far in advance, Jackie?
We could get it in the paper probably the 9th for advertising that weekend, like Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
Okay, so Paul's got a week to see if he can do it any other way besides Zoom.
Right.
I personally think we're going to need at least 15 minutes per candidate.
Okay.
I think we've learned a lot from the past 2 times that I've gone through this, just from the initial presentation, before asking any of our questions, whether we're going to ask all canned questions or canned questions and impromptu questions. But I like the candidate having an opportunity to present before we do start questioning. I don't know how everybody else feels about that. I didn't know if anybody had intended on sending a questionnaire out with canned questions, if you want, or prepared questions before they come in. So I wasn't quite sure of that. I would prefer to do all the questioning in person, but that's my, that's how I feel.
Is 15 minutes what you've done in the past with, I mean,
Yeah, approximately 15 minutes. Yeah, if I remember right. Maybe Jackie know.
Yeah, we've had done it several times, and it's a little bit different every time. 10 would be the minimum, 20 would be the max, and that was only when we had 3 or 4 candidates. So,
that's the problem.
When we had what?
3 or 4
candidates, you know.
Wow.
The
How do
more
you,
candidates-
and is that, so obviously we'd have to be limited in our questions.
Right.
That's enough to answer like 1 or 2 questions.
if you did 10 minutes apiece, that's going to be basically 2 hours of interviews. You do 15 minutes, because you got to have time for people to, switch up, get ready, whatever. If you do 15 minutes, I don't know, what's 9 times 15? That's a good chunk of time.
Yes, it is. That is. Oh.
And we thought tonight was long.
Yeah, right. And then you have to come back and vote.
Well, maybe we should consider a questionnaire for a few questions and then have a shorter in-person, question time. I don't know.
And you can also have them talk about themselves for 1 or 2 minutes to get some more background information if you want, and then ask, 2 or 4 questions.
So I kind of like the idea of having them speak out themselves for a few minutes, and then have maybe a select 5 questions that we ask each of the candidates to listen to how they respond. And then I know Lydia is really good at asking those, what are they called? Situation-based.
Or not situational. Now you made me blank. It's too late. I don't know.
Sorry.
Can I ask you a question? How you guys did this in the past with, if I have 3 candidates go before me asking canned questions, and I have now 3 or 4 times I've heard responses to, I kind of give an advantage to folks coming later. Are we going to put them in a green room with like earmuffs on so they can't hear the questions, or, how do you make it a little bit fair so the first person through the, the chopping block and doesn't have the same benefit of someone coming in, having, oh, okay, I see what these guys are doing and asking.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If we do, which will probably happen through Zoom, we can just kick somebody out of the Zoom room, one of the candidates, one at a time, and let the other in one at a time. But I think
we've done
that's,
that before.
That's not public then, though.
Yeah.
No,
No, it
It's
is
not for
public.
that candidate.
no, it's
No, but they're part of the public, and they would just be able to come in and view too as part of the public. So you're not eliminating the issue, is what I'm saying.
Well, if you park them in the waiting room, right?
But can you kick them out of the meeting? I don't know that we've ever kicked candidates.
Oh, I don't know. I just think, you know what I mean? It's
They
like,
can
you kinda-
stay to hear the subsequent candidates, but then
I think if
You know
they're
what
situational based, you're talking about your own personal experience, right? So it won't, and unless you're lying.
It's
but-
behavioral interview questions.
Behavioral, thank you.
It is, but I hesitate to ask every candidate the same questions based on what they submitted applications, they shared a little bit about themselves. It'd be nice to, I know we probably have to put some thought in ahead of time as to what question we might want to have asked, but I don't know. I have an issue just asking everybody the same questions. I'm not really sure what we'll learn.
There is actually a best practice around that, John, around for fairness and consistency and comparison purposes, right? However, I will say I've never done an interview in 15 minutes, so this is new territory for me. So I don't know. Maybe it is worth doing one or two ahead of time, and then spending our time in person, really being about them, speaking more about themselves, and any follow-up questions we have about that. I don't know what everybody thinks about that.
No, I do like that idea where you give them the canned questions that are kind of generic, and then you follow up with questioning their answers, which would be personal, and then also adding a couple questions that are very specific to them. That'll save time and make it more equitable for those questions that everybody's going to get.
I mean, if you actually relate it to REA endorsement, right? There were questions that were asked ahead of time, and met with them to answer any additional questions they had.
Yeah, I like that idea.
How much time do you want to allow per candidate? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? All determines the length of your meeting.
well, I would go with 15. Some of them might be shorter after their presentation. If we go with what John M. is suggesting, and which I kind of think might be a good method to send the candidates a questionnaire where they all answer the same question, and we'll get to read that before, and then the board would have the opportunity to ask those impromptu questions that their presentation creates in our own minds.
So most of you saying, so we're going to send out a written canned, everybody writes their, and then we get to look at that beforehand. Then when we get to that interview, we're asking specific to them or specific to their responses. So we have both a written response, and then we're live. Is it predetermined questions, or are we just hitting them with questions that we each thought of, or will we each take turns? Melissa's in charge. You ask candidate A a question, and Paul asks candidate B a question. How do you want to do it so it's not 50 questions? All of us asking a question of the same candidate.
Right. In the last, I think, 2 times, we went around. I don't know whether it was alphabetically or not. And just if a board member had a specific question for that candidate, they ask it. And it really went rather quickly because you don't have that much time to come up with a plethora of questions. And that worked well. That worked pretty well. Certainly, I would assume maybe some candidates will elicit more questioning. But I just think it worked well in the past, and I think it could work well this way. But I think we would have the added benefit of asking some generic type of questions just to get some feel for the candidate.
I have a concern about the questionnaire, and I'm going to ask Jackie about this because we have to make sure that everything is public, right? So if we're interviewing them, is that considered public? How does that work?
In the past, we did not have the questionnaire available publicly in advance, but the questions were public because it was part of the board meeting.
If we're not deliberating over those questions, that part doesn't have to be public. Now, we could publicize what the questions are. But as long as, and if it's written, we're not deliberating about it. I had that.
Right, you're deliberating.
That 315, yeah, the code.
So we could potentially put the questionnaire on the agenda then for the 13th, and then we send it out to the candidates. They answer their own individual questions, but the questions that we asked are in the public.
In the public, yeah.
You could do that.
I want to get clarity on that first.
Mm-hmm.
How about, I kind of like the idea of each board member. I mean, there's 8 board members, there's 9 candidates, right?
Right. We can
So
switch places, right?
Leslie, why don't, I mean, I would say maybe each one of us interviews 1 candidate. Leslie, you do 2 as the president of the board. I kind of like the idea of what if all of us threw all 9 names in a hat, and when it came your time to interview, draw a name out. If that person's already been interviewed, pick the next one.
Well,
And
we
that way
definitely
you have
would do
a
it in
total-
person, because how are
have
you
a
going to?
total random selection. I mean, I don't like the alphabetical job because I already know, to Paul's point, what order I'm going to fall.
No, well, actually, Jackie's very good. Sometimes she'll start maybe the first question, she'll go alphabetically, and then she'll go in reverse. So Jackie's been very good
Jackie
at
can have a hat
mixing it
she
up.
can pull out of.
Yeah, you just. I think that's a great idea. Just randomly pick it out and just have each. Just divide and conquer, right?
You good with that, Ms. Crumrine? Are you okay with randomly selecting names to
Yeah.
hand us?
Yeah, we can do that. So just so that I'm clear, one board member will interview 1 candidate randomly, and we can do it through random number generator, however, and Leslie will be doing 2. Right.
That'd be my suggestion.
And then you just have like a time limit for how long you can formulate questions. So if your candidate takes 15 minutes to answer your question, the 1 question, then that's all the questions.
If we have questions that we could submit to a database, let's say, right, that maybe are not specific to a given candidate, but are questions we might ask, even though it might not be our turn to ask, could we make those, is that deliberation? Could we build a database of questions that an interviewer could pick from if they were looking through them and say, hey, that's a pretty good question Paul Friel came up with. He's not interviewing this candidate, and I won't reveal that Paul's the one that came up with the question, but I think it's a good question to ask the candidate. Is that okay to do, or do we just have to think up the questions on the fly?
Yeah, we can certainly build a data bank of questions, and we can actually ask PSBA for some sample questions too. I mean,
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be helpful. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then that way, just like when you're interviewing, you usually use a data bank of questions. Okay.
How does the voting actually work then? Because we're going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes into interviews if we go 15 minutes apiece, right? Do you have to go around and around? One idea I had, which I don't know, Jackie, kind of how we all feel about this, but maybe all of us give our rankings 1 through 9, 1 being the highest recommended, 9 being the lowest, and you add up all the board members' scores, and the low score are your top candidates. So I don't know, maybe we screen down to 3 using that method. And then the next time around, if we want to do a further interview process, I guess we could. Or you could do the same thing over again, allocating your top 3. And again, coming up with maybe some kind of a screening process to say, we're ready to make a motion on this person. You could still disagree with it as a board member. I'm just trying to understand how you don't go through multiple rounds of 9 candidate votes, but still capture the sentiment of the board.
Could we do similar, John? I was thinking of something similar, but I wasn't thinking rank all 9 is, if we each came up with our top 3 candidates, and if there was a common, top 2
denominator,
common denominator, it was obvious, or it came down to let's say the top 2 of that round between all 8 of us, and then we just vote on those top 2, or vote, because that would then kind of decide it.
Well, but if we have
So
2
the easier
days,
way to do it,
if we have 2 days, we could run it like auditions and callbacks, where you get everybody on the first day, and then your top.
You could call
few.
that finalist. Yeah.
Right.
Well, the thing with just picking your top 3 that way though, Paul, couldn't it be possible though that if every 9 of us or 8 of us picked different people for the top, like we could end up having someone only get picked by 2 people to be the top candidate or something like that, and then would hardly be a consensus, you know? Like with John's methodology, you do get an initial ranking and then the subsequent, I don't know, something like that. But I would just be afraid of like having, you know, the person who gets chosen got 2 votes or something, you know?
Yeah, I was just trying to narrow the field and then us vote, like actually you have to vote on the person, you know, up and down, not
feel like
saying
they're
that
saying
would
the same
determine the
thing
person, you know, but
Really?
yeah, to your point, Kathy, that's a good point. I don't know. I'm just trying to avoid 40 rounds of voting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally
Which
agree.
is why I'm thinking there'd be 2, right? You take your 9 down to 3, and then you take your 3 down to 1. And unless, you know, and that would be the person that you would move to add to the board. Now, as an individual board member, you may have a big issue with someone that was kind of made it through the screening process. It still would be your prerogative to vote against. It's just a matter of what the majority of the board would say.
Yeah.
And I would assume, Jackie, that if we did something like that, that we would just have to make those rankings public, right? So everybody could see. And I mean, I think it would be good for us as board members to be able to say, yes, that is indeed my ranking, Jackie.
We can definitely do that. I mean, we can use sheets like Google Sheets that everybody has access to, and you could, you know, rank your top 3, and we could have it automatically calculate so that it's quick. I mean, I think if you're screening, it's a way to move through the process quickly instead of doing up and down votes on everything. It's just.
Is there a way that we could do that and just publicly show the top 3 that move on without, because I really wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I think the
rank
top,
everybody
focusing on the
publicly.
top rather than who we're eliminating would be
Well, if you
better.
said pick your top 3, then that's what you would show.
Yeah,
Right?
you're already then describing the 6 that you eliminated. So
That's right.
you would still show your top 3.
I know, but then
It's just you wouldn't have a degree of elimination. How's that?
Right.
Yeah, it's being picked on the team last. I just did, you know, I'm just, if we don't have to do that, avoid that, you know, hey, you're 9th, right? That's all.
Right.
I mean, if we're,
is everyone comfortable with 3, or do you want to go to 4, or are you comfortable with 3?
But then here's the flip side of it. If you shorten your interviews, you pick 3 or 4, we move on to the next day, ask more questions, and then go from there.
That's what I was thinking.
I like that.
So we could shorten it down to 10 minutes. Then we come out with 3 or 4 that we liked from their initial answers. We have a second day where we ask additional questions, and then we vote on that.
We have to have this all buttoned up by the 15th, right?
Yes.
Yep.
That's why we kind of centered on those 2 dates, the 13th and 14th.
right, so that you could actually take action at the end.
Right. The second day would be voting day and appointment day.
I think I would rather go 4 than 3. I just have an interest in making sure we capture the broadest kind of cut that the full board thinks.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too.
4 is a little better.
All right, I would agree. Are we all consensus on 4?
Yep.
And then
good.
the second day, we're all good with
Yeah.
that?
And the second day, we do the same style of voting on those 4.
So the second day, we would do another interview with additional
Right.
questions if we have additional questions. Maybe maybe we can extend that to 15 minutes if we need to. And then we vote.
We vote.
On the
On the who we think the board member that we think should be joining us, and then whoever got the most votes wins out of the 4.
Yeah.
We might have to eliminate to 2. I don't know. It's just tricky with.
Well, you might have to revote if you come up with, you look at, say, one person gets, well, there are 8 of us, one person gets 4 and 4, then you would vote again.
Someone would have to get a 5.
Somebody has to get a 5.
First round.
Well, right. Oh, I know, for the final. Yes. I'm just saying that if nobody comes up with 5,
right,
with the first vote from the 4.
So we already know it's going to be. it's probably going to be a voting challenge. So I think what we'll do is we'll move forward from the first day to the second day. We'll do another round of interviews. Then we'll vote on our top 2. And then once we have our top 2, then we vote from there. Is everyone okay with that?
I think that's fine.
Yeah,
How you
that's
get
good.
the top 2?
Yeah,
We'll
because,
do
yeah.
Just count the
the
number
same-
of votes.
The same thing we did again. You're picking your
Same
top.
thing we did in round 1, only you're doing it with
Top 2.
4 candidates and top 2. So
Okay.
you're doing a 1 and a 2, right?
Just pick 1, 2, and then whoever
1,
got
2, add them up.
Right. Yeah.
Low score wins.
And then somebody makes a motion.
like golf.
You can vote
Yep.
how-
Do we have to, for, I don't want to add a wrinkle, but do we have to deliberate publicly? So in other words, if we do that top 2, then that won't be seen publicly. We have to vote on the top 2, don't we?
No, we would do it the same way. We'd have to display that Google Sheets.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, sorry.
But just so everyone is clear, we are allowed to go to recess. You cannot operate in a group, but you are allowed to go to recess.
Yep, you are.
And what do you do in recess?
You go. You think.
You
can go think it
Oh,
over.
right. We're not deliberating. We can just go, hey, I need a minute to kind of look
Yeah,
at
I
the
need
answer.
15 minutes to collect my thoughts and really think about, take notes and review instead of an immediate vote.
So if your person doesn't get picked for the top 2, we can call a recess. You can have a couple
Right.
minutes
So
to
you
think
think,
about it.
okay, let me think about who out of these 2 do I want. Okay.
Right.
All right, so let's recap. So 13th, we're going to do 10-minute interviews with all 9 people. And the interviews will consist of a couple of minutes of them speaking about themselves, and then a couple questions. We'll have a database of questions. And what did we say? Each board member will interview a person. We're still
Yes.
comfortable with that?
At random.
So then we'll have a Google Sheet where we pick our top 4. We'll move those top 4 to the second day on the 14th. And then on the 14th, we'll do that same style of interviewing. What do we want everyone to ask a question? How do we want to do that?
Yeah, I think everyone at that point should have an opportunity to question each of the candidates.
Okay, so we'll leave 15 minutes block. And then if anyone wants to ask a question, they can ask a question.
Right.
And it can be more tailored to the actual person versus broader questions.
That sounds
And
good.
then we can do the same style voting of picking our top 2, and then we can pick from the top 2. Is everyone okay with that? Does that feel fair?
Sounds good.
Good by me.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to do with that, Jackie?
I don't think so. We're going to advertise as a Zoom meeting regardless, and
Yes.
then we'll determine whether you're going to be in one room together or you're going to be separate.
Mhm.
No, I don't think so, other than I just need to get the Google Sheet structured properly for both days, and then get you some interview questions that you can then add to. So I think we're okay, if everybody's comfortable with that.
I imagine the candidates out there, should we ask them?
I was just going to say I was going to open it up to any public questions real quick because it's already almost 10 o'clock. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
Is this a record, by the way?
No,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. All right.
Oh, no.
What is the record?
I feel like it's
This is
4
it.
hours. We're getting
I think
close.
This is it, yeah.
Come on, let's go for the record.
All right, we got 10
Oh,
minutes.
come
All right.
on. We don't need to break any
Any
more
public
records.
comment?
Yeah. Paul, do
We
we
have
have any?
one public comment. It's Mrs. Heather McCreary.
Okay.
It.
Mrs. McCreary, you're unmuted.
Yeah, so, okay. I think you guys are doing a great job on transparency, but are you going to release the names to the public? Because I sat through this process 2 times as a board member, and I don't think Mrs. Prophet was present when we did this the last time, but we were told that we had to do everything to deliberate everything in public. So I ask if you're releasing the names, because when we did this before, the candidates were in the actual meeting. There was public comment before the meeting. There was public comment after. So is that going to happen? Are we going to get to comment on the candidates? So just trying to understand the process, because I'm sure that it's confusing to the other people that are listening that also sat through this the past couple of times, because it doesn't seem like some of those things we did before are being followed this time.
Is that your only question? Or do you have
Yeah, it was a couple questions, like, are you going to release the names to the public? I don't
Okay.
remember whether that was done before or not. And is this going to be on a regular meeting where the public gets to comment? Because we had that both times last time we did this.
So Jackie, is it a regular board meeting calling a special?
It'll be an advertised public meeting. We're required to do that, to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there will be the standard public comment sections, and then this will just be an agenda item. The
Right.
interview.
I'll go back and look at the structure and show you a sample agenda. And
Okay.
then you can take a look at that and see what you think.
And then in terms of the names, I sat through one of the selection meetings. I don't remember if that was on the public side.
Yeah, I probably have to check on that, to be honest with you. I know
they were public.
the name. Yeah.
Public.
I would think if someone is putting their name forward to serve in public office, we could let the public know who they are.
I'm kind of with John on this one. I think,
No problem with that.
why don't we just,
Get resumes as well.
But I get it. If Jackie, if you can check legally, make sure that's what we can put out. I think we got to let the community know as soon as possible.
I'm sure we can. I'll just double check and then we can, I'll talk to you, Leslie, and we can release the name.
I'm comfortable with putting names out. It was just the resumes that I'm like, I don't think people want.
yeah, well, yeah,
Right.
if they're,
Yeah.
you know, names, addresses, phone numbers, yeah, I mean, certain things, right?
Yep.
Social Security, let's not do that.
Okay.
All right.
And then the public comment, is it before, is it, I mean, this is the only thing on the agenda. We're just doing this, right? So
Right.
to
So there's two.
question, is it
So-
before or after?
So think about it. It'll be the public comment before the interviews, and then there'll probably be public comment after the interviews. The way that it's structured, right?
Well, I really have to pull an agenda. I'll be honest
Yeah.
with you, to see how we did it in the past.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I'll just pull an agenda and I'll send it out to you. There's
You're
definitely.
only required to have like one public comment section.
Right, right. So you'll have public comment on agenda items. So if your agenda is the interview questions, the presentations, and the next item is the agenda item for the vote, but that would be on the second night.
Right.
Right.
So usually you would have comments on agenda items, and then if you wanted to open it up for anything but agenda items afterwards, you know, that's your prerogative.
When did we bring on Matt Fitzgerald?
Jamie Freeze, so I want to say 2018. So I think-
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably right in board doc. Probably.
Yeah, it is. In 2017, I think it was when we replaced Bill Lakoff. He retired.
Yeah.
All right, we'll look for that.
Spring of 2017. Yeah.
Whatever you guys decide, I think is, you know,
Mhm.
makes sense based on what we did in the past.
Yeah.
Some type of public comment.
We'll look at that. But yeah, we'll definitely have public comment, of course. All right. I think that's it. And I just lost my meeting. Oh no. Hold on. That was it, right?
Yes.
That's
there's
it.
Adjourn's
no
next.
other public
Adjournment.
comment there, right?
I don't think so.
No, I don't see any.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all your
Yes,
time.
thank you.
I think we did hit a new record. So bravo.
Woohoo.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
All right.
good night.
Good night,
everybody.
Good night.